See the waiting room.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, Lisa, it's really unfair for people to be more photogenic on Zoom, okay? That's not okay.
I think this is the first time I've put makeup on and done my hair since March, so.
That's funny.
And if you looked around the corner in this room, it wouldn't be such a pretty sight, so.
Hey, Matt, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
How's that?
Yep, that's good.
I appreciate it. We will start this over again. So good evening, everyone. I will call the August 6th, 2020 regular City Council meeting to order. And will Councilmember Harris please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America
and to the republic
which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please let the record show that all council members are present. Is there any correspondence or written public comment?
Yes, Mayor, we received correspondence from Roger and Shirley Baker. You all got that letter earlier today. And public comment, Olivia Brownson, why the police officers are not masked. Karen Steinhaus, Redondo Beach parking lot, noise nuisance parking violations. David Everhart, proposed park. Mark I, boat launch parking in Beach Drive. Jason Steele, Redondo parking lot. Ben Stewart, proposed changes to the Des Moines Marina South parking lot. Ray Valby, paid parking at the marina. Heidi Merrifield, parking at Des Moines Marina. Chuck Olson, Des Moines parking lot. Alice Damasio, marina parking. Bill and Patty Linscott, paid parking controls marina and Redondo areas. Ray Valby, paid parking at the marina. Barbara McMichael, the Van Gaston House. Holly Hayes, the boardwalk, and my people are wearing masks. And Rob Anderson, small business grant program. And I'm going to admit Rod Hansen into the meeting for public comment.
Okay, so before you, have you already gone forward with that?
Yeah, he is under review now.
Well, actually, so before we take comments from the public, I'd just like to remind those speaking that any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council will be muted and removed from the meeting. So when the clerk admits you into the meeting, your session will be unmuted. Please state your name and the name of the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. To be fair to everyone, after 3 minutes, your Zoom session will end. If you still have more to say, we're happy to take the balance of your comments in writing. And those could be sent to our city clerk.
And Rod is now in the meeting.
I see Mr. Hansen. Your microphone is muted, but as soon as you unmute, you will please state your name and the city in which you live for the record, and you will have 3 minutes. I hear you talk, but I can't hear you. Is there any way we can help Mr. Hanson unmute? One moment, please. We still can't hear you.
How about now?
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, so
All right. Okay. My name is Rod Hanson. I live down by the marina in one of the condos bordering the south parking lot. And I became aware recently of some proposals to potentially change the parking system there from the current system where you pay to get in and out through a gate to the pay and display system. And I submitted some comments through the city website just today. And fortunately, I did it just in time to come to the meeting today and express my views on that. And so I think what I'll really do is just read the comments that I submitted, just because it expresses pretty well what my concerns are. And so first, I'd like to say that implementation of the gate-controlled paid parking system was one of the best decisions we think the city's ever made. There have been many very beneficial outcomes. Prior to the implementation of the current system, when the access was free and unrestricted, except for the signs that were posted that told people it was closed at 10 p.m., which got ignored frequently, several unseemly and undesirable activities were commonly observed in the parking lot. Things like cars with multiple occupants, they would congregate in groups, they'd play their stereos at a high volume, talk loudly, shout, smoke weed, taunt or intimidate passersby. Cars would speed through the parking lot, spin donuts, create very loud engine and exhaust noise, creating an unsafe situation for those involved in the activity, as well as uninvolved citizens trying to peacefully enjoy the environment. Usually when these groups would leave, they'd leave a lot of trash behind that would remain until the marina staff could clean it up early the next morning. Often these nefarious activities would take place in the evening and extend well into the night past the 10 p.m. closing time. It was not uncommon for the activities to continue into the early evening, even until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And it was also common for the police to be called frequently, but they're not always able to respond. The marina hired a security patrol, but they were of no use. In fact, the security officer was often observed socializing with the rabble-rousers. If the gates are removed in favor of a pay and display system, the visitors who carry out the activities that I've just talked about are not the type that are going to comply with the posted requirements. Also, enforcement would require marina staff and/or the police department hours and agreements on ticketing non-compliant visitors. If it's not enforced, compliance will be minimal. From the time the current paid parking system was implemented, these activities essentially ceased. It was a very dramatic and positive change for the better. Yes, some people complained about having to pay, but they misunderstood that the marina was not supported by their taxes, but it was supported by the marina's users.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yep. Anyway, I think we should not take any actions that would tend to favor the disruptive, threatening, intimidating, and at times criminal behavior that would be attracted without access control gates. In any plan going forward, I think the best interest of the intended user should be honored and sought after as much as possible. Boaters, their guests, residents of the surrounding area who enjoy the peaceful environment and beautiful views, visitors who simply want to take a peaceful walk, ride their bike, and get some exercise.
Thank you.
You can read the rest of my comments online.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Next person.
Next is Reverend Shirley Baker, and then
Okay, I'm not seeing them on screen yet.
We unmuted.
There you go. We can't see you, but we can hear you. So that's fine. Please state your name and the city in which you live, and you'll have 3 minutes.
We're Roger and Shirley Baker. We live directly across from what is going to be, I guess, Shoreline Park or the Van Gaskin property. We are the only private home directly across from this area. We submitted our comments and a 2-page letter with some attachments, and we were very thoughtful in what we wrote. And that's in other words, the letter pretty much outlines what our concerns are in the building of this park. Our comments are that we would like to be more involved in the timeline. Our whole main investment in our home is tied up directly across from this park, and obviously making it accessible to the public rather than a private residence are really going to affect our home. And so if we need to do something before this park opens, we'd like to be more involved in the timeline so that we have time to react. Our main concern, which is outlined in the letter, is of course our safety, the safety of our neighbors, and of course anybody who even uses the park. This has been kind of a high crime area for drug dealers and purchasers. I'm sure you're all aware of Outlook 2 and all the calls that come from that. And if we just spread those same issues up into a larger area, it's going to be bad for the city as well as us. Finally, if there's any way with our experience, especially with Rogers, as Chief of Police retired from Anaheim and Des Moines, he's very aware of development and design in parks and how to police them, how to secure them, etc. And if there's any way at all that we can help, specifically him, we'd like to do so.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, I've made Ken Rogers into the meeting.
Ken Rogers, okay. We're paused one moment while the next person is connecting. Thank you for your patience. Looks like we're having a connection problem. Please stand by. I can see him on the list. Can you activate a video, see what happens? In the interest of time, I'm thinking we should go to the consent calendar and see if we can have, if Ken can connect in the meantime. And that way, if you show him in the waiting room after the consent calendar, we'll bring him back.
Yeah, ask him to log on and try again.
Okay, everyone, what we're going to do is we're going to ask Mr. Rogers to log off and log back on again, try and get him back in the waiting room so we can get him into the discussion. Because that can take a few minutes, let's go to the consent calendar. And then if we can get Mr. Rogers back in, then we will, I'll make a note to bring him in before we go to new business. Okay. Actually, before we go there, is there, Michael, do you have an administration report?
Mayor, I do not, but I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
And that would just be a generic response to the gentleman with concerns about the marina parking. And at the time we instituted the parking, it was a beta test. And now we're not completely satisfied with the customer service of the machines that service the tickets and so forth. And there seems to be, those seem to malfunction fairly often. But I want to just reassure everybody in any discussion we have, first of all, pay and display does not necessarily mean taking down the gates. And we totally recognize and are very appreciative of the law enforcement aspects of the paid parking and what that has done for the marina at night. So we're with that, just we're with you being the community, in terms of a way to retain the best aspects of what we've done and to improve the ones that we think could be improved. So that's the discussion that we hope to have in the future with the council. Thank you.
Okay, any luck getting Mr. Rogers in so far? Okay, I do show him on my screen. We may, as a participant, we may have to remove him altogether from the meeting to see that he can come back.
I have someone on the other side working on that right now.
Okay, we have tech support on that one, folks. So we're going to move forward. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda, please?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, draft resolution 20-043 for Soundview Park development, and that concludes the consent calendar here.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve this consent agenda?
So moved.
There's a motion made by Councilmember Bangs. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm not sure. I think I heard Councilmember Buxton first. Was that correct?
Yes.
Does any council member wish to remove an item?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to remove item 2.
Okay. Okay, item 2 has been removed for the consent approval. We will come back to that. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, item 1, approval of vouchers, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Let's see, I recognize Council Member Martinelli, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Nutting. Passes 7-0. Okay, this takes us back to item number 2, draft resolution 20-43 for Soundview Park development. And Mr. Harris, because you hold it, you have the floor.
I don't want to take the council's valuable time. I just cannot vote for this project. So that's the reason I pulled it. So let's vote.
Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, I will put the motion back on the table. The motion is to adopt draft resolution 20-043, identifying the city's authorized signatories for the Recreational and Conservation Office, RCO, grant application for the Soundview Park development, and further authorize the city manager to accept the grant funding. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 I see Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, myself, and Deputy Mayor Mahoney. All those opposed? I recognize the Councilmember Martinelli and Councilmember Harris. It passes 5-2. Okay. Any luck at getting Mr. Rogers connected?
We're showing the meeting. Let's see. Ken, can you hear us? Ken, are you there?
Okay, Council, unfortunately, we're still not able to get Ken Rogers connected. Bonnie will reach out to him and see what we can garner from his what comments he wants to share with the council.
Mayor, he did submit written comments.
He did submit his comments in writing, and those come to the council email.
Correct, and they'll also be part of the packet, like all the other comments and correspondences I've been doing for years. It becomes part of the visual packet on the website, so people can see the entire comment if they want to.
Okay.
We can't get them back.
Okay, please let me know if something happens.
Thank you.
Once we, so at this point, we're going to move into, I'm sorry.
He's back in here again. Sorry, we got to come in here one more time.
Oh, now I'm showing them in twice.
Yeah, it's like a meeting, so.
Oh,
Think he's here? Ken, are you here?
yeah, I see you.
Ken, can you hear us?
Hello.
Ken, I think we've got you. You're breaking up quite a bit, but just state your name and the city in which you live, and let's give it our best shot.
Okay, just confirm you can hear okay?
I can hear you really well right now.
Okay, great. I'm a little better spot. Tried to get on my laptop and that apparently wasn't working. So, Ken Rogers, City of Des Moines, 10th Avenue South. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some comment on an issue that certainly you're not going to act on today, but it's an important one to, I believe, to the city and certainly to the community. And that has to do with the parking arrangements at the marina and at Redondo. And I'm speaking on behalf of only myself, no other entity or organization, at least not yet. I have an expectation that the Marina Association will come up with some comments, but we don't have that together yet. So this is strictly me as an individual expressing my interest in encouraging the council and the committee that's going to look at the next step on the parking arrangement at this Des Moines Marina to consider it holistically. By that I mean not just on the financial piece, which is extremely important, but on the element of the parking security of the community. And to the extent that that you've made great efforts to implement the philosophy of paid parking, the concept of paid parking has been implemented. The execution on that philosophy in terms of collecting the revenue and accommodating customers has come up a little short, it seems. So I would encourage the community, the council and the committee to think about whatever that remedy is in terms of a comprehensive solution that involves preserving or enhancing security in both parking lots while meeting the needs of the customers to get in and out efficiently and effectively. The revenue that comes to the city is useful for sure. And then the method of collecting that revenue becomes important so that it's efficient and doesn't require wasted effort on behalf of staff to accommodate people that want to come and go through the parking lot. So to stay inside of my 2-minute time limit, I just want to weigh in at this point and say I've had conversations with several people, and they're interested in helping to solve that problem, but they want to see the enhancements that have already been accomplished around security and improving the aesthetic on both the waterfront pieces in Des Moines, preserved and enhanced where possible. So thank you for the opportunity to comment on that. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your persistence. Okay. Council, now we'll move forward to new business. You know, as this has been, oops, okay. As this process has been in the past, this is a team-oriented and collaborative process around getting the budget together. This is our first presentation from the staff. There will be 2 public hearings that will take place further on down the road later in the year that will come before we actually vote on the budget. So tonight is about council learning about, you know, learning from the staff where we are, where we've been, things of that sort, the things that the city manager and the leadership team want us to be knowledgeable about. And they will talk about numbers and so forth. However, this is not the time for individual requests to the budget. Those will come during the public hearings that we will have later in the year. And those will come well before we've actually voted on the budget. And then the other thing I'd like to ask all council members is the city manager and his team have worked very hard on this presentation, and they're going to cover a lot of material. It would be most helpful that we hold our questions, just please write them down or note them so you don't forget them until this presentation is completed. That will help us get through the presentation and give us the opportunity to ask questions at the end. So at this point, I am going to turn this over to City Manager Matthias and Finance Director Beth Ann Rowe, and they will handle the presentation in coordination with the staff.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me first of all say that doing preparation of the budget is really, in many respects, aside from our whole emergency operations, which was unique to this time frame, but the opportunity that I have to work with our entire staff on presenting the budget, understanding the issues that exist for different departments. And I'm going to take the opportunity tonight as each department head and staff present items to compliment them for the incredible team that we have and the incredible effort that they put forward. This is a very complex undertaking. I think that will be evident, but I just want to acknowledge what an amazing staff you all have and that I have the pleasure every day of working with. So let's go to the PowerPoint. So we have a fairly long PowerPoint. Kind of back up. Yeah. So the single most significant factor affecting the 2021 budget and preparation of that budget is the COVID-19 pandemic. So, okay. Sorry, you guys, if it jumps around. The context is that the city budget presentation process, as the mayor alluded to, based on state law, requires the city manager present to city council a recommended budget in October. And we will do that and provide that to you. That will be followed by at least 2 public budget hearings where council can review and amend the budget as they choose. In November, this will typically result in city council adopting a budget. And let me just walk through this. This is really, I think, the 5th year I presented the budget to the council. Previous budget retreats were focused on a number of specific challenges that we were facing. So the first year it was staving off bankruptcy. Second year was financial health, and we went through the process of receiving bond rating upgrades that saved us money as we issued bonds because our interest rate was lower because of the quality of our finances. Needless to say, we avoided bankruptcy. Then we looked at the challenges associated with succession planning. We had a workforce that was typically, one portion of it was older and one portion of it were sort of entry-level people. And we needed to make sure that when the elder people left, or for whatever reason they left, that we were able to address continuity of operations in the city. So one year we looked at that, and the next year we came back to council, that was last year, with what we had accomplished relative to succession planning. For example, we have a new assistant chief of police, and I want to tell you, hiring Mark Cooey, who was responsible for continuity of operations for the state of Washington in the event of an emergency, I'd say that was a pretty timely hire given the pandemic. But Mark's been hugely helpful to us. We have Nicole working as our assistant director of parks. And Nicole has had the unique experience of having left before COVID and coming back in the middle of it for a reason. And so she's had to adapt, and she's done a great job of that. We also have assistant finance director, Sean, who's been a huge support to our finance department and has allowed Beth Ann to do a number of things, including move forward on the financial management system. So this year's budget will need to account for impacts of COVID-19, both operationally and financially. And that's the challenge of what we're presenting to council. So our challenges are literally, our country is under attack from COVID-19. At the same time, we are confronting a long-standing historical injustice relative to social matters associated with racism, Black Lives Matter, and equity. And it's important to remember that equity, these two relate, because as we were able, as council chose to pass a proclamation, public health, there is discrimination in public health relative to resources and the impacts of COVID on people of color. And that's a function of income. It's a function of availability of health resources. It's availability of testing in low-income areas. And so those two come together as extraordinarily complex issues that as a society we need to address. And the city of Des Moines is not unlike any other city in needing to address these issues. In both of these, maintaining social distance, utilizing masks, other protocols are critical to reducing spread of the virus. And at the same time, recent fluctuations in transmission levels that you can see on TV every night are challenging the US as a whole to reduce risk by following recommended protocols. And just anecdotally for me, I know when I go to the grocery store, there are a whole lot more people wearing masks these days than there were 3 months ago. So hopefully we can take care of ourselves and protect each other. Next, please. So there is no playbook for what we're going to show you. And we've had to learn, adapt, respond with no knowledge of any of this. This has just never happened before, except maybe if you go back to 1920 with the global pandemic at that point. On March 5th, earlier than most cities, we enacted an emergency proclamation and took many steps to respond to the pandemic in Des Moines. And today we're going to walk through our local civic response to COVID pandemic. Remember, there is no playbook for our efforts. There is nowhere to go in the library and say, here's the book. This is what we do next. Every day we face great uncertainty and try to address uncertainty and minimize risk for our city, for our staff, for our electeds, for everyone associated with the city of Des Moines. So this is also, and I just want to acknowledge this, this has been extremely difficult, I can only imagine, for our new members of the city council who have never really seen the city operating under normal conditions. And the emergency proclamation gave expanded powers to the city manager and city administration. We have been under control and responsiveness to directives from the governor, including the Open Public Meetings Act and changes to that. And I think those things have been difficult to try to come in under these conditions when there's no real normalcy and make the appropriate contribution that I know both of our new members intend to make to the city. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Next, please. Cities have been hit hard by the pandemic, and a number face bankruptcy. There are very significant challenges experienced by cities in King County and elsewhere in Washington State. There's something like 2,100 cities nationally are going bankrupt. 27 states allow for bankruptcy for municipal jurisdictions, but there are 23 that don't. So they're going to have to deal with receivership or some other way of maintaining their existence. We are not experiencing catastrophic financial difficulty because of the manner in which we have managed this public health economic crisis, working as a team, and this will be evident in the following presentation. Okay, next please. The reports that you will see today are based on 3 primary questions. We asked all our department heads, and then we worked with them as they drew up the descriptions of what this is. Where were they on January 1st, 2020? Nobody knew anything about a pandemic from China at that point. What was their plan for the year? What have been the impacts of the pandemic on their departments? And what is their response to the impacts and challenges of COVID been? At the same time, and central to responding to those 3 questions, they were also asked to identify what are the essential functions for their departments. And I think that that is a question that this council and staff are going to wrestle with from now for the next decade in terms of reduced resources, reduced access, limits on what we can do. What is it? What are the essential things as a city government that we need to do? So with that, I'll turn this over to Shannon, who's going to talk about emergency management. And Shannon, I want to tell you, has been doing an incredible job just reaching out in the community, reaching out in King County, reaching out in the city, being a central part of the Emergency Operations Center, getting all kinds of things done, from organizing truck unloading at the food bank to finding thousands of masks that can be distributed to the school district and to other locales. So Shannon's done a great job, and Shannon, take it away.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just wanted to give you a quick overview of our response to COVID-19, the virus that is attacking the world right now. Emergency management, Des Moines Police Department reached out and partnered very quickly with our partners at the South King Fire Department. Through this incredible relationship, the city, Des Moines PD, and South King Fire were able to stand up the EOC in record time. In approximately 3 days, we had all the technology needed to get our EOC up and running. With our partners in our incredible IT department and administration, we were able to create a web page to reach out to all of our community members to keep them updated daily on the impact of the virus worldwide, nationally, to Washington State as well as our Des Moines community. We were able to offer daily updates with the continual changing information on how to protect yourself and your family from this virus. The EOC conducted daily calls with the directors and all of our community partners where we discussed all of the numbers, where we currently were, and where we needed to go to make sure that we were responding for our city staff, our partners, and our community effectively to make sure that we were protecting everybody the best of our ability. Once we stood up the EOC, the team came together every week and detailed an EOC report that we pulled together and sent out to the council to ensure that the entire council was informed as to what we were doing to reach out to our community, our partners, and keeping you all updated with what we were putting out on the website and making sure that you were aware of our numbers as well. For our community outreach, the EOC was lucky enough to reach out to the departments here at the city, the Des Moines Police Department, Larry with his inspectors, the Marina staff, parks maintenance, and administration, park and rec, all rotated weekly and met Rochelle and myself at the food bank every Thursday morning to help the food bank offload their semi-truck of food delivery to make sure that it got in the building and stored appropriately for the food bank to open on Friday. We started that in early April and it continues through this week. King County purchased 25 million cloth face masks. And the city of Des Moines was offered 8,000 to distribute to its community members. We were lucky enough to receive 16,000 instead of 8,000. We offered the face masks on a drive up and drive away basis and gave 2 per person in each family. And we were also able to give 6,000 of those to the Highline School District for their backpack program for back to school. We supported the senior services for the to-go lunch program, checking it for safety, making sure that they had all proper PPE for serving. We reconfigured the parking lot a couple of times to accommodate the high volume of seniors coming in to pick up lunches and also our Eats vouchers. We communicated with our community partners and our neighboring cities, working very closely with the city of SeaTac as well as the city of Federal Way and all of our community partners here in the city of Des Moines, making sure that we were all in the loop, on the same page, and moving in the same direction. Currently, we are working on getting the city ready for phase 3 and phase 4. Currently, Governor Inslee has put a stay on all phase moving up in phases. So we currently sit in phase 2. When we do get to phase 3, we want to be ready with our Safe Start plan and reopening the city to not only our staff, but also the public. So we have a team of individuals from every department within the city working together to make sure that this plan accommodates every single department to make sure they have all the PPE that is required for the jobs that they do when they're here at work. And it has been an incredible process. We're working on COVID training for all employees that they'll be required to complete prior to returning to work. And part of that will include reading the plan cover to cover and signing off that they understand it. We have personal protective equipment here on site. We maintain the current stock weekly, update a tracking sheet. We have a minimum par level to make sure that we are always at a certain level based on what our burn ratios currently are with the staff that we have here on site, knowing that those will go up. We do have a significant amount, and I am proud to say that working with Tony at the police department has been incredible, and I believe that we are more than ready for everyone to come back. We put in 7 health screening stations, so all city employees screen when they do come into City Hall or into any city facility. That is private. You fill out the slip and drop it in the box. So we are keeping all of that private. And then when we do open up to the community, we will also require health screening for anyone coming into City Hall. For recovery, it is my job to educate, inform, and update our community of our city's recovery milestones. We're doing this through these meetings as well as on our website. We review and submit expenses for reimbursement. We have several different grants in different departments that we are getting funding reimbursed, as well as FEMA's Public Assistance Program, the CARES Act. I maintain all of the PPE supplies for all of the departments with the exception of the police department. And then we are, I am here to make sure that we stand ready for a possible second wave. And I believe that we have done a great job as a team, and I am so incredibly thankful to work with these people every day.
Thanks, Shannon. A couple of points about what the Emergency Operations Center and the cooperation and the actions we've taken. There have recently been articles about the increase of fatalities in South King County, but our city has never been mentioned in that context. And any level of mortality is not acceptable, but the city of Des Moines has had 3 people who've succumbed to this virus, and that number has been stable for about 4 months. So we can't take credit for that. That's a function of the randomness of a terrible virus, but we can clearly state that if we had not taken the actions we had taken, it would be worse. So, and I think everyone associated with EOC, the fire chief, their assistant chief is the incident commander for the COVID, David Taft, and they've done a great job. So, Shannon, thank you for that. I'm going to ask Beth Ann to just give a brief description about the budget process for the council, the calendar, so forth. What are the elements moving forward?
Beth Ann Rowe, Finance Director. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of the budget process and the budget calendar. The City of Des Moines operates under the council manager form of government and is based upon the model like a business with board of directors appoints a chief executive officer. We have an elected city council responsible for policy making and appointing a professional city manager. The city manager is responsible for city administration, providing policy advice, directing daily operations of city government, handling personnel functions, and preparing the city budget. March through July, the normal budget process starts early in the year, really with our capital improvement plans. The draft transportation improvement plan this year has already come to council for approval, and it's a component of the capital improvement plan, which is taken to Municipal Finance Committee and then brought to council for approval, and that will be coming later in September. Budget instructions are sent to departments, which communicates the city manager's budget objectives, and departments meet to discuss their budget submittals. Next slide. In August, we have this budget retreat with City Council to provide an overview of current financial status, general description of the entire city budget. In August, we update and work with departments on budget submittals, and we update revenue forecasts and expenditure assumptions. Early on in the pandemic, the city created scenarios to deal with the loss of revenue due to the stay home and stay healthy order. The city used 2 scenarios for the 2020 budget that looked at a 10% reduction and a 15% reduction in revenues. As we'll see later in the presentation, our current revenue decrease is about 13.5%. In September, we prepare the preliminary budget document. We prepare notices for public hearings in October, November, and provide those to city clerk for publication when necessary. In October, we have our preliminary budget document, which we present to city council and available to the public. We have our first public hearing on the 2020 preliminary annual budget, a first reading. And next slide. In November, we have a public hearing for the general property tax levy and revenue sources. We have our public hearing on the 2021 budget, the second reading and adoption. And at this time, we usually bring forward a budget amendment for the 2020 annual budget, which will be revised due to the impact of COVID. Next slide. So, ever wonder how your city government pays for the services it provides every day? Similar to a family's budget, the City of Des Moines prepares an annual budget to plan out how it will pay for services. How the city is able to spend money is partially determined by the source of revenue that money comes from. The general fund, general services such as police, parks, and community services, municipal court, administration, and support services are supported in the general fund. Most of the general fund money comes from core revenues. These are property, retail sales, business and occupation, and utility taxes that are approximately 60% of total general fund revenues. We also receive money from fees, fines, and service charges, and Washington state shared revenues, such as marijuana and liquor excise taxes. One of the primary goals in preparing the budget to maintain fiscal sustainability is to maintain the legally established fund balance threshold of 16.67%, which is consistent with Government Finance Office Association national standards. We have special revenue funds. They're used to account for proceeds of specific revenue sources that are restricted or committed to expenditures for those purposes, other than debt service and capital project funds. We have 13 of those special revenue funds. Our two most significant funds are the Development Fund and the Street Operations and Maintenance Fund. Part of, after bankruptcy in 2017, to provide more stability in the fiscal health of the city, we created the Development Fund with a $1.5 million cash transfer from the general fund. So this fund receives development revenue directly to pay for development related expenditures. It ensures permit revenues paid at the beginning of the project are set aside to pay for those costs of the projects over multiple years. Debt Service Fund pays interest and principal on the portion of the 2018 refunded bond for previous transportation improvements, and a couple loans that are almost ready to be paid off. Capital projects funds, we have the municipal capital improvement and transportation improvement. Next slide. We have enterprise funds. We have two of them, the marina and swim. And these are paid from fees that are charged to the users. And they're self-supporting, and no general fund money is used to support those activities. We have internal service funds used to account for activities where those goods and services are primarily provided to other departments or funds on a cost reimbursement basis for the 6 activities there. So information from all these funds and activities are compiled to create the city's overall annual budget that supports the daily operations and funds of the services to residents. The preliminary budget is presented to the City Council and the community during public meetings. With feedback and input from these meetings, the city manager and staff make any necessary adjustments and present a revised budget to City Council for approval, which is normally in November. So that kind of concludes the overview of the budget process and calendar.
Yeah, thank you, Beth Ann. I want to add one word to Beth Ann's presentation. She said after bankruptcy, and I'm going to say after avoiding bankruptcy.
There you go. Yeah, sorry about that.
Right. The other thing for council to see, which you will see as we go forward and we start to look at the numbers slightly later in this presentation, is the continuity and integration of information between the 2020 budget and the 2021. Because typically the 2021 budget would be sort of relatively standalone document relative to what does council want to accomplish. But in this year, what happens in 2020 is going to hugely affect what's possible in 2021. So just to keep that in mind. So as we've gone through this, and we're starting with the operational piece, as COVID advanced and cities closed down their facilities, perhaps the most important dynamic that occurred was the human resources and what strategies could be put in place to address manpower issues, address salaries, address COLAs, address everything associated with the cost of our labor force. And fortunately, AJ has done such an incredible job on this, and she's going to walk through with you generally what were the strategies that we adopted and are in place, and then you will see these kind of expressed in the different department approaches to responding to COVID. So with that, AJ. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, council, mayor. Entering 2020 marked my second year with the city, and I had purposefully used my first year here at the city to really understand the lay of the land before moving forward with any changes. And so the focus for 2020 pre-COVID was really about ensuring the foundation for HR-related services, that they were strong, compliant, responsive, and strategic. I was also armed, or am armed, with my amazing part-time HR coordinator, Betsy Dunn, who was hired in 2019 and brought on to assist with the implementation of our HRIS system. And really, she has been instrumental during this time as we've had to make a number of changes fairly rapidly while ensuring that the day-to-day work is still being completed. So January 21, 2020, the focus for me in HR was really about streamlining HR operations by leveraging technology. And specifically what that meant is that we needed to purchase a human resources information system to better manage employee information and offer a self-service feature for employees to access personnel information. The good news is that is done. Thank you very much, council. The second piece of that was really about upgrading our existing application tracking system to include an integrated onboarding program for document tracking and a more seamless interaction with new employees. And that's been delayed. And really the reason why that was a priority is because I wanted to improve interaction with applicants after they've been hired. Our current process is paper-driven and clunky. And in the context that we have it now, it's really a one-way process. So the goal, which I will pick this initiative back up in 2020, is to make a more planned introduction for new employees to the city, with the outcomes being that new employees are able to adapt quicker to their jobs and improve employer retention. Another area of focus was to identify, assess, and review HR policies, practices, and procedures to ensure compliance and mitigate risk. That included an in-depth review and acceptance of the updated personnel manual. The last the version that we have of the personnel manual right now is 2010. My predecessor actually did the bulk of the updating, but we've had some major new legislative laws come into effect since I've been at the city, one of them being paid family medical leave. And there's also some other areas where the one size fits all approach won't really work. And so that would include some considerations for our police support services employees, our record specialists who work in a 24/7 shop. We needed to update the Civil Service Commission rules, which that has been delayed. And quickly, if you're not familiar with the Civil Service Commission, it covers all positions at the police department except the chief, assistant chief, and our office administrator positions. And essentially, the Civil Service Board governs the recruitment cycle, classification, removal, and discipline of covered employees. And so we have a new commissioner. And with COVID, they really haven't been able to go through the process under normal circumstances. So it didn't really make sense to start the process of reviewing the rules critically at this point until they have a better sense of what is and what isn't working in our regular business environment. So that is why I've just decided just to delay that until 2021. Review and update our background policy, shift from a decentralized model and expand to encompass different types of volunteers. The shift from the decentralized model just really means that we had identified staff in the city that were able to run background checks. We've now brought that back in-house. So we were able to accomplish that. So I'm really happy that we were able to get one thing off my list. Development of training paths designed to meet compliance requirements and to build critical skills and competencies. And really what that means is just ensuring that our staff have not only access to the required training like workplace harassment, but other trainings that will assist them in their positions and identifying really tools that they'll need in their toolkit to be successful as they move forward in the city. And then embed the concept of wellness throughout the city. That's pending. Typically we have a number of sites or a number of events on site. When we closed facilities and limited the number of staff in the building, that really forced us to rethink how we deliver our employee wellness program. And really the employee wellness program looks to build and sustain a culture at the city that's going to encourage our staff to make healthy lifestyle choices for all elements of wellness. And that includes physical health, mental health, and even financial health. You know, clearly the well-being of our staff is important to the city, but there's also some monetary benefits for the city as well. Oftentimes when you have a wellness kind of culture at your workplace, you tend to see reduced absenteeism. And the city applies each year to receive the Well City Award from AWC, which when awarded results in us receiving a 2% discount on our medical premiums for the following year. So that's anywhere from a $30,000 to $34,000 savings. Next slide, please. Before I begin the slide, I just want to take a moment to address some of the staff changes that we did. None of these decisions were easy to make. These were and are our coworkers and people that we spend a great deal of time with every day. They were also people that had relationships with the community and the public. You know, these are familiar faces that people were used to seeing when they came in to utilize our services. Some of these staff members had worked at the city for a really long time. This wasn't lost on us, and so it was very important as we went through this process that we proceeded in a respectful manner as we started making these changes. So COVID hits. And so in response to the pandemic, HR collaborated with the individual departments to develop an overall strategy related to city staff. And that included implementing a hiring freeze and suspension of the police department's Hire Ahead program. We laid off extra hire employees affected by program cancellations, primarily in the Parks and Recs department. We utilized attrition and early retirement incentive programs to generate savings. We leveraged the Federal CARES Act through the Employment Security Department and the Standby program. A little bit about the Standby program. So due to the closures and the program cancellations, we asked supervisors to identify positions that had been impacted by those changes. These positions were ultimately selected to be placed on standby. And what that means is that the Employment Security Department paid them a weekly benefit plus the CARES Act money, which for most staff was close to or more than they would have when compared to their regular salary. The city was able to save on salaries during this period. And the CARES Act did allocate some federal funds for reimbursable employers for half the benefits. So next slide, please. Oh, excuse me. Can you go back? I apologize. Thank you. Got ahead of myself. So due to the closures of city facilities, we had to come up with a telework agreement, which is also a policy and a program, and which was established, and we transitioned at least 50% of our staff to remote work. In cooperation with the Teamsters, we adjusted our negotiation strategy to account for unprecedented economic uncertainties, which included a mutual shared risk concept for addressing wages in 2021 and 2022. The contract was ratified by the Teamsters with overwhelming support. We developed a rotational work schedule model for public works and marina staff to ensure continuity of services in the event that staffing was affected due to the coronavirus. We also updated and created a number of relevant leave policies to include the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, which President Trump signed into effect on April 1st. That was designed to support our essential workers. Next slide, please. So COVID-19, the new normal and the path ahead. One of the things that we've been working on in the HR department in conjunction with emergency management and the city clerk's office is our Safe Start plan and preparation for the workforce to return on site as required. Some of the steps that we've taken have been a staff and supervisor survey, which really was designed to take the temperature of staff and their comfort level with returning back to work, and also ask them to identify barriers. Shannon touched on this earlier, but we implemented a Safe Start committee, and that was an opportunity to engage with staff and really leverage their brains as we start to work through the Safe Start plan, since they are the SMEs on how they deliver their services. The idea really is that by mitigating the risk of exposure is really a shared responsibility, and it requires a shift in workplace culture. So it's important that we engage staff as stakeholders. And then of course, with that involves development of applicable policies. As an example would be the face covering policy and the Safe Start manual. We're looking to support other departments as they begin to reorganize their departments and make programmatic changes. Along with that reorganization of departments and programmatic changes means that there will start to be personnel changes to align with those reorganizations. We're going to be working on implementing our HRS, our Human Resources Information System, and also updating and creating policies, practices, and procedures that reflect the changes in the workforce and how our services are delivered. An easy example of this is that we're actively working now on a survey to identify staff who may be impacted by school changes in fall. And really the idea now for HR is, as we continue to partner with the departments, we're trying to shift to a more proactive approach. Thank you.
Hi, Michael. I can't hear you. I don't know about anybody else.
Nope.
Okay, is that better?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's better.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, that what she describes has been done from mid-March till now, which is a huge amount of work. But also, it's, as you will see throughout this presentation, is something I'm really proud of how we've responded, that the integration of finance and human resources and emergency management, and then the departments themselves specifically, that's the future of this city. And I think that these folks are on top of it, and we're well represented in what we're trying to do. So with that, I'd like to ask the judge or Jennifer, whoever's doing your presentation, not sure, the court's response to COVID-19.
All right, thank you. I welcome this opportunity to update everybody on how the court has been managing throughout this crisis. In January of 2020, we were seeing criminal filings going up. In particular, we were seeing an increase in DUI filings. We were continuing to work with our DUI court participants and seeing some of those participants make great progress. It was in February that Jennifer and I were keeping a track on the news related to COVID. This is, I usually tell people that court is nothing like you see on TV. This is the exception where I'll say that our court is very much like you see on TV in terms of a relatively small space that is packed with people, defendants, sometimes their children, attorneys, sometimes treatment providers, court marshals. We transport defendants to and from court from several local jails. So it's a very busy, robust, high volume court. And all of you that come and sit for city council meetings, you see the space that we're dealing with. So 5 days a week that is transformed into the city's courtroom, and we do the work of the court there. In February, we became aware of the issues related to COVID. And on March 4th, actually in late February, we had a bench bar meeting with the city attorney's office and also the public defenders. And we sort of did a roundtable about, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And then it was March 4th that Jennifer and I practically ran into each other trying to get to each other's office. It was on that day that we realized that we would not be able to continue as we had been. And so at that point, we went into what I call triage. And I would say that for our part, there was really 3 phases to how we have approached this. And so the triage, after we sort of picked ourselves up off the floor and said, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? We decided that we really needed, for the sake of the work we were doing and for the sake of our staff and the people that we served, that it was very important that we approach this with as positive an attitude as we could. And if you can go to slide 2, please. So our guiding principle really was trying to turn adversity into opportunity. And when I say this, I am in no way diminishing the pain and the suffering that's been occasioned by COVID. We here at the court, and I'm sure other departments see this too, that it has had a tremendous impact on people's lives. From the point of view of how we deliver our court services, we saw this as an opportunity to really do better by everybody that we serve. And so every step along the way, we would stop and ask ourselves, A, are we doing the best that we can here? B, is this something that is sustainable over the long term? And C, how is this benefiting or improving upon the services that we already provide? So having said that, during triage, and if you go to the next slide, the concerns that we had were many. First off, court, everything in court is time sensitive. Obviously, there are the constitutional rights of criminal defendants. There are rights of victims in cases. And so the court had to first look at the framework within which we were working and determine what can we do by way of emergency orders? What can we, calendars or dockets could we temporarily suspend? Which could we move to adjudication by mail primarily? In this regard, and I did issue a number of emergency orders along this regard. However, we were helped along when the state Supreme Court intervened and they issued emergency orders, which gave all local courts vast authority to do what they needed to do to keep not only defendants and parties and victims safe, but also their own staff. So once we looked at that and realized we had a lot of latitude, then the next question became, well, first of all, public safety considerations. Obviously, you always have those in criminal cases. People were still going to be arrested. They're still entitled to be seen within 48 hours. And how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that no contact orders are being issued appropriately, that they're being served? So public safety was at the forefront of our mind in all of this. And that's where it was very helpful to be able to work hand in hand with both the public defenders and the city attorney to try to work through some of these issues. And I'll tell you, one of the issues that I worried quite a bit about was how do you hold court without a courtroom? The courtroom itself, the entire layout, it's iconic. It's a signifier that conveys legitimacy and authority and certainty. And I really believe that during this time, it was imperative that as a court, that the citizens of the community see us operating and not just operating and flailing or failing. That was not an option, but to see that we are upholding ourselves to the same standards that we did before COVID-19. So then we went into problem solving mode. What are our resources? We talked about our core staff and our personnel, who can do what and from where. What resources do we need to move? We knew immediately we would have to move to a virtual courtroom. What does that look like? How do we get notice out? What if people can't access the virtual courtroom? What if there's just resistance across the board to moving to a virtual courtroom? And so part of what we had to do as leading the court and also trying to solve some of these issues was to really manage expectations and say, yes, there's going to be some significant changes. Court is not going to look like it has in the past, but, and it is going to, we are going to have some hiccups here, but we're going to be able to do it, and we will get through this, and we're going to be stronger than ever. And if you go to the next slide. So we really had to take all the work that we do in that courtroom and move it online. Because it was not tenable to have the volume of individuals come into court at the rate that they were in January. So I won't go through all these, but some of the things that we did when we restructured was that we shifted the civil traffic hearings to adjudication by mail. And after a couple months of that, where we could get our sea legs, then we've expanded that to accommodate Zoom hearings by Zoom. Routine criminal hearings have all been moved to Zoom hearings. We have had changes in SCORE operations, and I would like to say that SCORE has been right there with us all along the way, and I really do appreciate the lengths to which they have gone to make sure that public defenders can have access to their clients without the attorneys having to go to the jail, and also accommodating our request, because Zoom was our chosen platform, and they weren't using that before, but they have now offered that to us. The other issue that came up was that the general public has a public trial right to open courts. What does that look like? How do we do that? So we started live streaming our court. So folks can go onto YouTube, and every day they can see their court in action. And I actually would encourage, and I think this is one of the benefits, is that the public will have a bird's eye view into how the court operates. And it's not always, in this way, it's not like TV, because it's not always exciting. In fact, sometimes it's like watching paint dry, but I think it's a worthy lesson to go on and see the work of the court in action. We simplified bench warrant quash procedures. We wanted to be sure that people who had outstanding bench warrants would be able to come back to court. We wanted to bring them back into the fold if possible, rather than have those warrants hanging out there. We have created and are in the process of creating a virtual clerk's office, so that anything that anyone would need to do at the clerk's office can be done online or by phone or by email. We had to completely throw out, anybody knows that lawyers and courts are driven by their calendars and their dockets. We had to completely throw out our calendar for the rest of 2020 and rebuild it from the ground up to reflect all of the changes that we were doing. Probation moved to, if somebody's on supervised probation, instead of having face-to-face meetings with the officer, now they're by Zoom, and we weren't sure how that was going to work. And I'll tell you some of the anecdotal results we've had so far, but that was a real shift. And let's see. We also are revising jury trial procedures. We did suspend jury trials for a couple of months because we needed to get our processes in place. And within that time, the state Supreme Court issued an updated order permitting courts to hold jury selection by Zoom, which is what we are going to do. Our first trial will be in September. And again, it's a matter of managing expectations. I expect that there will be some hiccups, but we are prepared for it, and we will make sure that everybody that participates in the trial is comfortable with the technology before we start. So because we were doing all of these changes, we did do a reassessment of our personnel needs, and we had to review the additional resources that would be required to support this new structure. As AJ alluded to in her presentation, certainly there were some tough decisions that had to be made. And we are moving forward. And if you go to the next slide, I want to show you visually, this is our lobby, and it's usually on a court day packed with people. And if you hit the button again, the screen should, yes. So we are investing in some of these kiosks, so there's no need for face-to-face interaction. Once City Hall is open to the public again, we are still going to encourage the general public that anything they need to do through the clerk's office, they should try to do without coming to the court. But those that do come to the court, they will find a kiosk like this. We will also have one that is accessible to those who are disabled, and they can do everything from talk to a clerk, to make a payment, to actually submit documentation to the court. And you can go to the next slide. We also will have a very secure drop box outside, and click again, please. And it will look something like that. Jen, have we received that yet?
Yes, we have. It's in the court lobby.
Okay, so that will be installed shortly. So that's another way to try to minimize the amount of people that are coming to court. And then lastly, go to the next slide. So click again. So before, that's not our courtroom because I didn't have a picture of it, but this was what our courtroom would look like on a typical day. And you can see the problems with that in light of COVID. And so now you see on the right-hand side with Zoom, we're able to accommodate everybody that needs to be there. This particular hearing was a DUI court hearing. We have blurred out, for the privacy of the defendant, we've blurred out his name and his image, but you can see that we were able to have a treatment provider present, defense attorney, we have probation there. If an interpreter is required, the interpreters come on, and we're able to hold these hearings just as we would. You can see that I am in the virtual courtroom, and it looks like a courtroom, and that's what we wanted. So go to the next page. So in terms of budget impacts, there was a number of technology and equipment items that were necessary in order to accommodate our restructuring. All told, it came to around $30,000. We have been, as we've been ordering these items, we are applying for grant money through the CARES Act. We have received reimbursement for $3,300 to date. Jen just put in a request for, I believe, an additional $15,000, and then there'll be a balance of about $11,000. Once those items are purchased, then we'll be able to submit for reimbursement for that. So that's where we are now, and looking forward, go ahead and click, please. I wanted to talk about the challenges that we have going forward. Currently, we still are operating under these emergency orders. Certainly during this period and even after expiration of the emergency orders, there may be legal challenges to the procedures that we are using. Obviously the court will entertain those challenges and rule in accordance with the law, and we'll address that if and when it comes up. We do know that there will be, at some point, our caseload is going to increase as the filings return to normal levels. What does that look like? Because the Zoom hearings do take longer, and our slots for available hearings is not as broad as it was when we were doing in-person hearings. I do have some concerns that we may or may not have an adequate jury pool to conduct jury trials. I do want to assure any of those out there who are watching this that we will be taking every single measure and then some as as determined by the state and local and federal guidelines to ensure the safety of everybody who comes into the courthouse. We would not open the court up again to jury trials if we weren't confident that we could do that. Another challenge is ensuring that defendants or litigants actually have access to phone or video. If they don't, then we will have the ability to bring them in on an individual basis or in low numbers very shortly. I will tell you that has not been an issue to date. It's worked out really well. So we are planning for the resumption of in-person hearings. I can guarantee you it will never look like that picture I showed you where we have all those people in there. Going forward, it will not look like that. So even when we do open it back up, it will be a lot fewer people. Then there's what is referred to as the unknown unknowns, right? So we have tried to the best of our ability to identify issues and make sure that we are staying one step ahead of the curve. There are going to be issues that pop up we did not anticipate, and we are aware of that, and we will deal with them as they unfold. And for the last slide here, here are the benefits that we are seeing. Number one, I hope that it is an accurate statement to say that we are maintaining public trust and confidence through the fact that we've maintained continuity of operations. The public should always know that the court is able to do the work of the court even in times of tremendous stress. The access to justice issue is huge. Those crowded courtrooms represented a number of defendants who would spend half a day waiting for their 15-minute hearing to be called. With a few exceptions, we have limited that to 15 minutes. I mean, almost as soon as they're in the waiting room, we're able to bring them in and have their case heard. And we've had individuals who have taken breaks at work to have their court hearing. So we're getting really great feedback from both defendants and from attorneys that this is an incredibly efficient way for the court to do its business. I can tell you anecdotally, and I've spoken with both defense counsel and the prosecutor to ensure that my assessment of this is correct, but anecdotally it appears that more people are showing up to court. Which again, that was one of the unknowns. Are people going to show up? If you build it, will they come? And they have. And once they come and they see how easy it is to access the virtual courtroom, it's self-perpetuating a positive benefit. Probation reports, increased compliance with probation appointments. A lot of individuals would simply not show up for their probation appointments. The fact that they're showing up for their virtual probation appointments means increased compliance and better supervision. And lastly, if you had told me a year ago that we would be doing this, I would have said, you're insane. There's no way we can do that in a matter of months. It's just not possible. And yet we've done it. And so I think that we feel so much better prepared for any future emergencies. And we've kind of been through the gauntlet, as all of us have, learning as we go. And so I feel very confident that in the future, continuing with this emergency pandemic and going forward, anything else, that we're ready for it. And I want to thank my staff. They've just been so professional and dedicated and had such good humor throughout. And that's just made it that much easier for Jen and I to do the work that we've had to do. And that will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. As you went through this, I recall a conversation with Jennifer probably late May, I think. And Jennifer was talking about how challenge can create opportunity. And I think that where the two of you have taken the court to this point in this short a time, with this level of efficiency and focus and in all the aspects, is just a demonstration of great leadership. And we really thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. So let's move on to our city attorney. And you can have Tim present this.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Tim, City Attorney. I'll be presenting for the legal department. So entering 2020, as I've stated before, the legal department is primarily a support department. So when departments were presenting their goals for the year, those are also my goals. When other departments are successful, I believe that makes the legal department successful. Additionally, 2020, we look to continue to review our processes and procedures citywide for areas that we could limit potential liability and minimize risk. On the prosecution level, our jail budget is always a concern. So our prosecutor was working with our police department in late 2019 and early 2020 on target specific crimes for increased jail time and looking at our warrant processes and when we book cases and seeing if we can make changes there to reduce our jail costs for certain non-emphasis crimes. So that's kind of where we were when we were entering 2020. We could go to the next slide. And then of course, COVID. And so the legal department drafted the emergency proclamation that was signed on March 5th. Like our city manager said, the city of Des Moines was one of the first cities in Washington to make that proclamation. Shortly thereafter, the governor suspended the Open Public Meetings Act, and that, as the council is aware, severely limited the actions that the council could take. So a lot of our priorities that had been priorities before, we couldn't accomplish them during the suspension. The suspension is still in effect. However, it was modified on June 1st, which is why the council has been able to take additional actions. So the Open Public Meetings Act is still suspended, but the council can take full action. So the legal department, the physical offices closed in March, and all of our staff are telecommuting, and that's been going great. Our new #1 priority is really now this new world with orders of the governor and the health department and the county, and these can change on a daily basis. So it's really keeping track of those and making sure we're in compliance, not just in the legal department, but citywide and of course with the city council. And as the court stated, initially court operations were largely halted, and we, as a prosecution, stopped filing many of the cases that we had because the court operations were changing so fast. Next slide. So where we're at now, the legal requirements continue to change on a daily basis. We're continuing to monitor everything, national government, the state government, to the county. And our priority really is making sure that the city is in compliance with those requirements. Our office is still closed. Our physical office is closed. All our staff are telecommuting. As I mentioned at the last meeting, one of the benefits of that is our domestic violence victim advocate is able to be available full-time on her telecommute status. Additionally, we had a full-time paralegal position that was not filled. And because our offices are closed, a lot of those duties are not necessary at this time. And so we've frozen that position, and that'll be something that's budget. Additionally, the city clerk's office has taken on the civil service piece that position previously did, and they've actually been extremely helpful for our department in doing some of the tasks that position did. And we've, in our department, also picked up some of those tasks. Some more benefits developed is we're essentially paperless now. We're doing everything electronically. Our budget had a small travel and training budget. Obviously, we're not using that at this time. And I really want to just point out, it was a great presentation from the judge. And our prosecutor, Tara Vaughn, has been involved in kind of every aspect of that for the prosecution side, and making sure that we're doing what we need to be doing to ensure that it's done legally, and kind of just juggling this new normal. So she's been doing a great job of that in coordination with our assistant city attorney, Matt Hutchins. So that concludes the legal update. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think it goes without saying, and we see it every day, what an incredible city attorney we have. Thank you. So let's move on to Des Moines Police Department. Chief Thomas.
Okay, City Manager, Mayor, Council, welcome this evening. I would like to give our Police Department presentation. Go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so where we were on January 1st of 2020, we were operating at full capacity. Our staffing was full. We had an animal control officer. We had a traffic safety officer, which was one of our higher ahead positions. We had implemented or hired on a new records lead, and we actually had 2 school resource officers at Mount Rainier High School and then at Highline High School, temporary school in town. We were in the process and fully implementing our records management system and our program to increase efficiencies. We were pretty much up to full capacity. We had a street crimes team where we were operating with a sergeant, 2 street crimes officers, and then 1 officer assigned to the ATF Violent Crime Task Force. So we really had turned the corner to operating as a proactive police department rather than just responding to calls for service. We had been approved by the council for the drone program. We'd purchased the equipment, we had secured the licensing and had selected our team. And after approximately 20 years with a very outdated and poor dash cam program that was not very effective, we had purchased a new program and got that implemented. Next slide, please. COVID hit, and this was a pretty big challenge for us. We were part of emergency management, the fire department, city personnel to get the emergency operations center up and running. You've already heard about that, but from the police department specific, we had identified a safety officer to deal with COVID issues, an exposure control officer, acquired PPE, and had daily meetings with our command staff. We continued 24/7, maintained operations in the police department. However, we did review our response to calls for service and our staffing impacts. We created a table that identified the different types of crimes that we respond to and whether based upon which phase that we're in, whether we would respond, handle it by telephone or online. We talked about reduction in workforce phases. So we planned early in case there was an exposure that then created additional exposures. How would we respond to that issue? We canceled the majority of our community outreach and community events and community meetings to try to limit the impact. We did close our facility, the front desk, to assist. We did have several exposure incidents where our staff were exposed and had to go into quarantine. One example that I can give, there are 20 people in our patrol division between the sergeants and the patrol officers. At one point in this process, I believe it was April, of those 20 people, 12 of them were in self-isolation due to exposure. We did have a couple of officers that did contract the virus. which then brought exposure to other members of the department. But from that pre-planning, we were able to maintain full staffing throughout the entire time by using the reserves that we had in place. And then finally, one positive, because we did not want to be out and expose our officers, we basically purged every possible item of evidence that was eligible to be purged, and did a full reorganization of the evidence room, which was probably would not have been able to be done without this due to having that time available and putting those resources to work. Next. So a couple things, and the city manager talked about this earlier, some of the challenges with policing today and what has come up. As I spoke about a little bit earlier, we had to examine our response to calls. We don't want to expose our officers to getting sick. So in consultation and coordination with the fire department, we suspended the majority of our response to medical calls and non-emergency calls. There was a strong emphasis placed on telephone reporting and online reporting, again, to try to protect the community and our staff. We did remain accessible to the public, though. We do have a payment box out in the front, a drop box out in front of the station, and we also implemented a new online program for pet licensing and alarms, so that those items can be updated and paid for online. And we, in order to stay in compliance with state law, we implemented a program for safe concealed pistol license processing, even though the front desk was closed. We were became aware of the campaign 8 Can't Wait. We analyzed all of those issues. We provided a response. I'm very happy to say that our police department, all of their recommended policies we already had in place, and we were in full compliance with their recommendations. And we implemented and have had our first meeting of the diversity advisory group, and have done some work already with that group as we continue to move forward in the police department. Next page. So we did have a peaceful protest of more than 100 demonstrators in our community. We worked and coordinated with that group, and that was very successful. We're in the process of researching and analyzing the use of body cameras. There's been a lot of talk on that, so we're trying to get ahead of that and get some research done and some recommendations. Crisis intervention. So we're currently looking at best practices and partnerships. The South King County police chiefs are working closely together to see if we can do something on a regional basis. We've been working with Representative Tina Orwall and other legislators to try to get some state funding pushed down to our department to address co-responder behavioral health. We want to do the best we can to work together to address those issues. As you know, we have the Redondo Police Substation. I have offered that to King County Mental Health as a location for their mobile crisis team to work out of. So we're looking internally within the police department, down at City Hall, with personnel to look at the co-responder type model. We're looking at it from a South King County effort and a statewide effort. So this is a huge issue with crisis intervention that we're working on. The Valley Independent Investigative Team would be that team that does investigations if the police are involved in a deadly force situation. We're members of that team. If one of those incidents occur in our city, we'll have that team come to our city to conduct that investigation. And we need to ensure compliance with those Initiative 940 and Washington Administrative Code standards. And then, of course, we are an accredited agency, so we have ongoing compliance with policing best practices. Next. So where we're going, we're trying to, again, always looking to maximize our efficiency and effectiveness. We're looking at a dedicated traffic officer. As many of you on council are aware, we get issues and complaints for speeding vehicles, loud mufflers, issues with parking lots and other areas of town. Prior to COVID hitting, we had an officer, a traffic officer that was deployed at many of those locations and for those issues, and it was very beneficial and positive. Once we lost that position due to the virus, those complaints or concerns from the community increased drastically. So we think by re-implementing that, it would be beneficial. With that traffic officer, we're also going to maximize our services to the community, and we're looking to add the addition of a narcotics detection canine team. That would be an existing police officer, but we would connect them with a drug dog. The issue is with the courts being shut down, whether it's municipal court or superior court, there's not a lot of activity going on with arrests and proactive arrest type situations. And we're seeing huge narcotics seizures. We're seeing a lot of issues currently going on in that area that endangers our community. And we feel that as we get up and running and back and going, we need to really put a focus on protecting members of our community. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to say that, you know, Des Moines has the fortune of a very dedicated, loyal, committed, and knowledgeable police department. And I want to tell you something about the chief, is that when he mentioned there were, what, 12 people out on quarantine at one point, and the patrols kept on going, one reason was because the chief participated. So we thank you for that, Chief.
City Manager Mathias?
Oh, could you hear me?
Yeah, I just want to interrupt 1 second.
Yes.
We've been up and running for close to 2 hours, and I think you still have a ways to go on your presentation.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask the participants if we should take a 5 to 10 minute, well, right now it's about 6:51. Have us come back at 7 o'clock. So just kind of a quick comfort break. I'm seeing a lot of people raise their thumbs. So I apologize for the interruption, but I think it's necessary to keep everybody engaged. So at this point, we're going to recess until 7 p.m. The network clock I'm looking at says it's 6:51. So 9 minutes and we will resume. Okay?
Pun intended.
Okay, everybody. We are back. Thank you for everyone's patience, and well, let's just pick up right where we left off. City Manager Mathias, you have the ball.
We're gonna move on to operating departments and start with community development.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Susan Cesar, Chief Strategic Officer. The first slide here has just a couple pictures of some of the things that are going on in our department. On the left is the new development that we'll be issuing shortly called Point by Vintage on Pack Highway, and the latest pour at the Des Moines Theater. Next slide, please. A little bit of background about the majority funding source for our department. Fund 105, as Beth Ann mentioned, is otherwise called the Development Fund. And this fund was established 3 years ago with initial balance of 1.5 million from the general fund. The idea of this fund is that the customers, when they apply for permits, they pay their fees in advance, and those funds go into this account to pay for the future work in processing that permit. And that can be anywhere, usually 12 to 18 months, but for large projects, it could end up being longer. The fund balance, as we'll see in just a little bit, is healthy and it's sustainable. We look at that every year and make projections of the development that's coming in and what we need in order to process the development and maintain a healthy fund balance. I'll note that construction boom is continuing, and we're very busy. We had an initial dip when construction was first halted, but that rapidly recovered and is exceeding last year's workload. Next slide. Just a snapshot on Fund 105 that Beth Ann put together. As you can see, we have a healthy ending balance, and in fact, the projected budget for next year has a slight increase in the fund balance. Of course, this is our finance department and our best guess at this point with the information that we have. Next slide, please. So going into 2020, our plan was to continue to both review and inspect the development project workload that we have. We knew of some major developments. Wesley continues their phased improvements. Waterview Crossing was finishing up. It still had a high inspection workload. The theater is moving right along. And then Point by Vintage, we just had, started to become more aware of that one. And that one is actually moving fairly rapidly. We thought that we would also complete some code amendments that have been on our list for a while, and our annual comp plan amendment. We had just signed a contract at the end of 2019 with the council's ability to have us implement an electronic plan review system. And we thought that that was going to go, thoughtfully and not slowly, but never thought we would implement as rapidly as we did. We also continued the training and certification program for succession planning that we talked about at the budget last year. And we were going to work on some economic development, and of course Sound Transit is in the midst of their permitting. Next slide. And what actually happened, we had a screeching halt to construction, and then City Hall was closed. The construction guidance that was coming out of the governor's office, as Tim also alluded to, was less than clear and rapidly changing. So there were times when we were posting new guidance daily, weekly, and all new procedures in order to sort through what was allowed and what was not allowed under the latest guidance. So as the halt ended up to be fairly short and construction began to reopen in stages, we had to figure out how to do everything differently. How to do pre-applications, how to accept applications, review them, issue them, inspect them, and answer our customers' inquiries. Next slide, please. Just to give you a snapshot of what was going on as we were figuring out all these new procedures, you can see from January to July in 2019, the total valuation of projects we had in review was around 31 million, and this year it's 131 million. So a lot of that is due to some larger projects, Wesley, Point by Vintage, the theater. So our revenue reflects that because that's paid in advance for the work that we need to do. And just one metric, the inspection workload, although the permit numbers are not quite as robust, the number of inspections required for the larger developments is significantly up. Next slide, please. And then, so what did we actually do? And before I go through some of this, I really want to give kudos to the staff, both the building division, the planning division, and the front counter, because every one of those folks really came with their kind of creativity and flexibility in order to best serve our customers under very difficult conditions and maintain a high level of service. And they did a fantastic job. Because we had planned on implementation of electronic plan submittal that was accelerated to a rapid pace. I have been involved with many implementations over the years of different systems, and this was really record time. It's up and running within a couple of months and working well. We figured out how to do virtual pre-application meetings, virtual pre-construction meetings over Zoom. We also implemented some virtual inspections for certain things. Because we had many projects that were already in the queue with paper, we figured out how to accept paper submittals with no contact. And really kudos to the front counter and the building division on that, because they really figured out how to do all that, including payments and everything. We've moved to electronic response for customer inquiries and zoning information. And along with that, each inspection takes more time because there are additional safety procedures that are required. And they contact each person ahead of time to make sure that they understand the protocols and are following all the safety procedures for our staff and for the construction workers and staff. So at this point, we have all services available electronically, and of course, the inspectors, while many people are working from home, they are in every day with a full inspection workload. But amazingly enough, it's been a relatively smooth transition, and we've had very few customer issues. We are still looking at the procedures because we implemented them so rapidly. They've been a little bit stable for a while, so we're taking a look to see where we can make improvements and even do a better job of customer service. Next slide, please. The other things that we have to do this year, we've still been able to complete some of that other work. You saw the flood hazard regulations come through recently and the first round of our code cleanups. We will have some very minor comprehensive plan amendments coming later in the year. And our planning staff continues to work with King County and Puget Sound Regional Council on the information that kind of comes out of Vision 2050, which includes a buildable lands analysis and other work. We've continued the training and certification process for the inspection and plan review staff. And that brief shutdown was used to advance that process, and several people got additional certifications. And we also have allocated a planner, Eric, to economic development. Next slide, please. So going into 2021, we have, like everyone else, a lot of unknowns. We don't really know for sure what's going to happen to the economy and the construction. The good part is that we do have these major projects in the queue, and they're going to take a while to process and go through. So we've got some work for a while. We are looking at some of the changes that we've made, we likely will want to retain. An example might be pre-application meetings. If there are 10 people in the room and everybody saves an hour commute, that's 10 hours of time just for that one meeting. So there may be some good things about the new procedures that we'll want to keep. We'll continue to adjust to the additional regulatory and safety requirements as they come out and as we start to reopen. We expect that the development that's in process will continue, and as you've seen, we have a good story to tell in Fund 105. It's in good shape to kind of see us through what comes in 2021. I think that's the end slide. Yes. Oh, yeah, okay, now parks. Thank you, Bonnie. So do you want me to just—
for 1 sec on the
Okay.
parks? I think council could appreciate that this report under normal circumstances would be awesome. But under these conditions, what I hear from developers is it's the financial stability of the city. It's the customer service and dealing with the building department. It's the opportunities that come in terms of land values in South King County, and it's the low cost of money for people who want to invest. So all of those, I think, play to our favor, and I think Susan and her staff have just done an extraordinarily good job of not only surviving but thriving in the midst of this pandemic. Thank you. So let's move on to parks. Oh my God, Susan.
I'll put another hat on and continue with parks. I'm actually just going to do an introduction here in the last few slides, and I'm going to ask to Rick Scott and Nicole Nordholm to do portions. Rick will talk about the recreation, and Nicole will talk about Human Services, Senior Services, and the Arts Commission. So just to start off here, our 2020 plan, as we had discussed previously with the council, was to examine the role of the Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services in the city and review the programs essentially for value to the community. Were we bringing the most value to our community with the resources that we had? And then we were planning to bring recommendations forward to the city council for appropriate program changes to maximize that community value. Next slide, please. And so then what actually happened, again, was COVID and shifting and very uncertain regulatory and safety environment. And especially as it relates to our programs for children and also for our staff and the community, safety needed to come first. And so some hard decisions also had to be made in this department. And I'm going to ask Rick to first talk about the recreation programs.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Rick Scott, Recreation Manager. So as Susan mentioned, as COVID hit, we had planned like a normal year for our before and after school programs. Our summer camps were beginning to start planning for as well as January started. So it's a long process to get these large programs up and running because we serve about 120 to 150 kids a day in our before and after school programs and our summer camps. So, as COVID hit and the schools shut down, so did we. Initially we thought maybe this was going to be a short-term thing, but as it continued to grow, we knew
that we weren't going to be able to provide services for the rest of the school year. So at that point, we made a tough decision to separate with about 35 extra hire staff, knowing that we were no longer going to be able to provide those programs during that time. And during that time, we knew that there was still a need for those kids who would come to our program. So we started to provide daily virtual activities for the kids to do while they're at home and not in our programs. And as May hit, and we're still kind of hoping for a glimmer of hope to have a summer camp, and as the end of May kind of came along, we knew that that probably wasn't going to be something we were going to be able to provide as well. So as May came, we knew we weren't going to be able to provide safely a summer camp in person with the resources and spaces that we had to go along with the guidance that was set forth at that time. So at that time, we also had to make another tough decision to put 2 staff on standby because of the decreased workload that we had, knowing what we were going to be able to provide moving forward. So with that came, 5 months worth of summer camp programming planning that went out the door, and then we had to quickly pivot into providing virtual summer camp for the kids that needed something to do while they're at home. So currently we're providing 3 activities per day for kids, 2 Zoom calls each week for different age groups, where we provide games and activities for them to do over Zoom call to see their friends, as well as 1 contest each week, which continues to grow. So, and then as we look forward to the fall and online schooling, again, that's something that I don't think we're going to be able to provide safely, again, with the resources and stuff that we have and the guidance that's set forth. So that's something that we're probably going to move forward, or we are going to move forward with continuing virtual programming as it moves forward. There's a lot of unanswered questions right now as to what we're going to be able to do, but we're going to continue providing things for kids to do virtually at this point. Next slide. With our sports programs and field rentals, again, as COVID hit, we were 2 weeks away from 400 participants in our soccer program starting, as well as our first large sports tournament, softball tournament coming up as well. And again, those regulations came down hard with limitations on in-person gatherings, meaning that we were gonna, what we initially started with was postponing all field rentals and sports programs. And again, as May hit, we knew that we were going to need to cancel those programs as well. So we've canceled all sports programs, all field rentals for the rest of the year at this point, and we're going to continue to reevaluate what we can do in the future as soon as things either continue to get better, regulations are lifted. But the main thing is, if we're going to provide these programs, they need to be provided safely. Some things that we've been doing in the meantime is we partner with the Seattle Storm and the Seattle Sounders to provide a virtual camp for the kids, for 50 kids, which mainly in the Midway area, where we, myself and Kyle Ellers, our assistant recreation director, we delivered balls and t-shirts to every participant so that they didn't have to go out of their way to get the stuff, and they could participate in the camp and receive the equipment without having to get out of their house. And we partnered with Skyhawks to, usually in the summer, we provide 5 or 6 camps, week-long camps in person. Again, that was something we couldn't provide. So we partnered with Skyhawks to provide 82 individual sports camps that kids can take part in virtually. And we're currently looking into esports gaming, which is not something we've ever done before, but there's a market for kids who like to enjoy video games. Again, I'm one of those people who likes to be active and stuff like that, but we gotta look at all markets and what we can provide to anybody at this point in time. So that's something we're pursuing as well. Next slide, please. The same thing with classes, activities, and community events. Those regulations came down pretty hard, and the in-person guidelines that came through were kind of excruciating, meaning that we couldn't provide these programs. So we suspended all in-person classes and activities and canceled all community events. One thing that we were able to do right at the beginning, our extravaganza event, we ended up doing a virtual coloring contest where we ended up delivering prizes for those winners to their homes again, so they didn't have to come out of their house and stuff like that. So that meant all of our team dances, movies in the park were canceled. All those community events that we usually provide for free were out the door. Some of the things that we're doing now is we're providing a drive-in style movie at the marina on August 21st. We actually did virtual bingo with kids today, which was a success, and we might be doing that again in the future since it was very awesome. We partnered with the library to do a scavenger hunt where people find the posters in our parks and they're able to scan a QR code and get a free book from the library. We're continuing to provide different virtual family programs as well as self-paced events that families can do on their own where they're not congregating together. And moving forward, we'll continue to provide those programs. And I want to say a big thanks to Kyle Ellers and Tawny Drum for not only doing their own job during this whole thing, but absorbing job duties of others and doing things like delivering lunch to the seniors, working at the food bank, handing out masks and Otter Pops, which you're going to be doing tomorrow with Tanya from the police department. We've been shooting and editing our own videos, along with navigating this whole virtual programming world that's obviously brand new to us. It hasn't been easy, but it's been very easy working with them, and they've had a smile on their face the whole time. So with that, on to Nicole.
All right, well, hello, Mayor and City Council. I apologize about my voice, but I promise you it's just, I think, allergies. I don't have anything else. I wanted to touch on, so as the city manager mentioned, I came back from my leave to quite a different world. And like Rick just mentioned, things have been just, I mean, everyone has just jumped in and done such a wonderful job of just making sure things just keep running seamlessly. Our human services, so the Human Services Committee has been able to go over and review. We got 41 applications for this next cycle for 2020 and 2021. And the total request is about $420,000. And so we've been able to communicate via Zoom to review the applications. There's just been a much greater need, both just for human services in our community, as well as due to the COVID crisis. And we are recommending an increase in human services funding from last year's $150,000 to $175,000. Next slide, please. And then as far as the senior center goes, our senior services, as we all know, seniors are quite a vulnerable population. And when City Hall was shutting down, of course, our Des Moines Activity Center shut down as well. The increased need for both services for them as well as just contact for our seniors was a big just issue with the COVID and isolation and that kind of thing. So our response, like I said, was the facility closed down, meaning all in-person programs and rentals were stopped. We quickly turned around and were able to provide one of the first hot lunch programs around. A lot of other centers were, doing cold lunches to go, but we were able to partner with our Catholic Community Services to continue to provide hot lunches to go for the seniors. And this has proved to be immensely popular. It started at about 30 meals per day, and now they serve upwards of 100 to 130 each day, Monday through Thursday. And a big help as well from our transportation services, as well as city and park staff to both deliver the food and help out up there at the center. As well as Shannon touched on this earlier, but our emergency preparedness manager and team have been really helpful with just keeping the safety protocols up there in order. I mean, a lot of seniors are up there and we want to make sure that we're practicing social distancing and everyone is safe. So they've done a lot of different organizational up there just to make sure that's running smoothly. The staff up there as well as volunteers have been able to continue to provide phone check-ins. So they contact upwards of 100 seniors each week just to check in and see how things are going. They also can refer them to our social worker for on the phone support and whatnot, as well as different holidays that have fallen now during this crisis. We've done different flowers, special food, cards for the seniors, which is wonderful. And then the EATS program is another program that has just been enormously successful. Every week there's a new voucher to a local area restaurant, and the seniors can go and pick that up when they're up at the center for lunch. And at this point in time, we're in about 12 weeks of the program, and so that's over 1,500 meal vouchers have been distributed. And Rochelle Sems, our management analyst, is in charge of this program, and she has given me information that about 75% have been redeemed. And these certificates, of course, they don't expire, so they can be used anytime. Let's see. Oh, our VETS levy, our Human Services VETS levy grant that was started in 2019, we have it for a 5-year period. We've been partnering with the Central Area Senior Center to provide an African diaspora cultural hub. Well, of course, when COVID happened, this sort of halted, and we now are back. We have weekly calls with King County, and we're back in kind of the collaboration mode to get things up and running with that partnership. And that's largely going to look like different meals and creative ways around that, just due to the fact that our center is currently still closed. And then lastly, the Senior Services Committee as well has been able to meet via Zoom, and they, of course, are willing and wanting to help in any way they can with just support for the center. And some wish list items for the facility once it reopens are new tables and chairs, kind of a redoing of the floor, and potential upgrades to the restroom, which these are not included in the budget, but would be down the road different wish list items. Next slide, please. And then finally, the Arts Commission. So as was discussed previously, the concert series all had to be canceled, unfortunately, but this was for safety. And at this point in time, the Arts Commission continues to meet via Zoom. They've offered different budgeted funds for different needs in the community and helping where they can. And they still are super busy with different art in the community. There was a lot of collaboration for the SR3 down by the marina to figure out and vote on the new artwork that'll be up, as well as Midway Park. We're working currently with different community members, as well as getting local area school children involved in putting up some neat wall art up there. And then finally, the Maury Island mural is now in place, and there is a photo you can see right here. Next slide, I think, or I might be finished. Oh, no, not back to Susan.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Another thing that has been going on, as you know, are the playground improvements, and this is really a Public Works implementation. So I really want to shout out to Public Works Department and their work in getting these playgrounds up, and I think they look fantastic. And there also is the court redo at Midway Park at the bottom. Next slide, please. So grants, this is an area that takes a lot of effort, and we are constantly working on, and this is really a team effort between the staff in the Parks Department. The Soundview Park Van Gaskin, we had 2 grants, RCO and Recreation Conservation Office and Conservation Futures from King County. The reimbursement for the conservation future is complete, so we received $594,000. The RCO acquisition grant, we are in the midst of completing the requirements for the reimbursement. That should be done maybe in the next month or 2, and then we will receive $274,000 toward the acquisition costs. And as you know, we have a new development grant in process, and we will have a presentation on that in September. And so we won't know yet for a while if we have been granted that. We also had 2 grants for the Field House Field Drainage Project from the Recreation Conservation Office and King County Youth and Amateur Sports, which was around $107,000 each. And We had some work to do for cultural resources evaluation. That's done. We needed a certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Commission because the Fieldhouse Park is a historic park, and those improvements are beginning. Next slide, please. Midway Park, this is such a good story, and you know, it's hard to pick a favorite project, but this one, you know, is kind of there. As you know, we partnered with the RAVE and the RAVE Foundation, the Sounders Charitable Arm, also the Seattle Storm, and funding from Symetra Insurance. The kids from Midway Elementary did artwork, and you can see that on the bottom right, and that is now complete, and I think we'll be going in shortly, I think tomorrow or Monday. As Nicole mentioned, there'll be artwork that the Arts Commission is working on for the wall, and Public Works Department is installing new benches and new trash can. Just kind of some upgrades to make it look nice. The acquisitions of 2 additional properties to add to the park that we received, if you recall, King County Conservation Futures Grant for the 2 parcels. And this was one of the very first match waiver projects that they approved, which means that no additional money was required from the city for match. That was fully funded. And those 2 properties have been acquired, and that is complete. The one with the house on it, that one, they're due to move out by October, and then the council has already approved demolition of that, of the residence. Next slide, please. So this is a really good, this is the fun part to tell you about. So we also submitted a new grant application and asked King County Conservation Futures for $1.89 million to acquire the 2 additional parcels that you see in the red in the picture. And in anticipating that it was possible that we might get some money, we have purchase and sale agreements in place on both parcels. And the committee is recommending full funding for the total amount of $1.8 million. Those committee recommendations are final. The grant itself won't be final until the King County Council approves their budget in November. I think that it's, you know, we're pretty optimistic that this will go through the King County budget because it's a dedicated funding source from a levy, so it is unable to be used for other purposes. So together with all 4 parcel acquisitions, the RAVE Foundation redo of the court, the facelift, and the artwork, this will totally transform Midway Park, opening it up and creating additional open space for this community that is sorely in need of that open space. Next slide, please. Looking ahead to 2021, we are going to deal with continued uncertainty related to what's possible for both regulatory and safety reasons. We also have a project that we need to do even in the middle of a pandemic, and that is an update to the Parks, Recreation, and Senior Services Master Plan. And we have to do that every 6 years, and that's in order to maintain eligibility for some of the grants that we are applying for. So we're going to be working on that. We also are going to look to find additional ways to serve our community safely as possible. We are going to look to complete the 2 new grant-funded property acquisitions for Midway Park with the assistance of the City Attorney's Office and others. And then start looking to what will the 4 new parcels look like as far as landscaping and uses, and we hope to involve that community in what they would like to see. It does have to, it does have to be open space, so it's there are some limitations on what the area can be used for, but within those bookends, we definitely want to hear from the community. And we also, of course, are going to deal with increasing senior and human services needs. I also wanted to, for the Parks Department, to really compliment the staff, because it's been a tremendous amount of work adjusting to all these changes, making decisions, and the grant applications. So every single person in the department, and also others within the city, have helped us to do all this work and to be successful with our grants. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Susan. As you can imagine, the hardest thing about working with Susan is finding stuff for her to do. But that's a great job and really appreciate it. You know, it's amazing, like between parks and community development, how innovative you've been able to be and how successful, especially in acquiring other people's money, which we love.
Thank
So
you.
let's move on to the marina.
Thank you, Mr. Mathias, Mayor, City Council. Scott with your Des Moines Marina. First, I want to apologize if my dog wakes up. I at least have a treat for her so I can keep her quiet maybe. But anyway, the Des Moines Marina, as we know, operates under an enterprise fund, meaning it is not supported by property taxes, general fund money, or any outside funding. It is set up so marina moorage and fuel sales cover all the marina expenditures and capital improvements. Along within the marina budget are two general fund zones, the Redondo Zone and the Waterfront Zone. As we move forward, you'll see how the coronavirus has affected the Marina Fund and these two zones and some strategies for the future. Next slide, please. The Redondo Zone was created to utilize parking revenues to support the overall cost for repairs, maintenance, janitorial, along with securing funds for future capital projects. Redondo is visited by thousands of people each year. With the impacts of the coronavirus, it has become even more popular, offering outdoor space for both family playtime and exercise for everybody to enjoy. Next slide, please. In July of 2019, for the safety of the Redondo visitors and the surrounding community, the fishing pier was closed, having major impacts. As for years, this has been an attraction for so many walkers, fishermen, crabbers, squid fishermen, and along with providing spectacular views and amazing sunsets. As the city moves forward with rebuilding the fishing pier and the restrooms, this will make Redondo a definite spot as the top place to visit and enjoy on Puget Sound. Next, please, thank you. This slide shows the direct impact that the coronavirus has had on our Redondo's parking revenue. As to ensure social distancing, we closed the parking lot and areas around Redondo, impacting revenues by up to about 54% in comparison from January to June of last year. As so much entertainment still remains closed, we feel we'll continue to see more people using the boardwalk and the beaches for that ongoing entertainment and exercise. Moving forward through the rest of this year and into the future, we have changed some parking procedures. We've added some police enforcement and increased staff presence, thus ensuring both compliance and safety in these parking areas. Revenues are of utmost importance to continue to cover ongoing maintenance, service, and these future replacement costs. Next slide, please. The Waterfront Zone. The Waterfront Zone is similar to the Redondo Zone. I just put this, one of my favorite pictures, so I had to put that in. Next slide, please. In 2017 of July, paid parking was installed in the Waterfront Zone. Revenues help support staff's time associated in this area, janitorial, maintenance, parking equipment, and time spent in this area. Parking revenues also support funds for the much needed replacement of the deteriorating north bulkhead, as protecting our north parking lot is not only vital for the protection of the marina, but crucial in securing this chosen space as a regional location for emergency management. Next slide, please. Thank you. Similar to Redondo, to maintain that social distancing, the Waterfront Zone parking lot was closed also, which in turn had a direct effect on revenues by nearly 45% for the same amount of time period, January through June. As we look ahead into 2021, We understand the need to continue to support our organizations such as the Farmers Market, Destination Des Moines, and work closely with our Events and Facilities Department, ensuring that in 2021, we have events, opportunities, and programs set in place to regain the visitors and users of these facilities. Increasing the support will assure the financial stability in our waterfront zone. Next slide, please. Des Moines Marina. The coronavirus has various effects on all aspects of the marina. Early on, with the marina being deemed as an essential service, staff learned quickly how to adapt working differently, maintaining a higher level of awareness for safety while working on the docks, at the fuel dock, doing janitorial, and interacting with the general public. Our office was closed early and still remains closed, but staff has adapted to working via emails, texting, phone messaging, and mailings. These practices have become the new normal. Katie and Tara continue to do an incredible job keeping the marina functioning at a very high level. We are continuing to work with our customers by, if necessary, setting up payment plans. And additionally, we are continuing to support by waiving all of these late fees throughout these unfortunate times. Next slide, please. During this time, permanent mortgage has continued to hold strong and actually has increased a little over 3%. Instead of traveling and vacationing, studies have shown people are registering boats that may have been sitting on the other side of their house for years and buying new boats. Unfortunately, there has been some negative impacts during this time. We had a cancellation of over 10 yacht clubs, and this has led to effects on both our guest mortgage and fuel sales during our January through June time period. We've seen reduced revenues of approximately 23% in our fuel sales and about 20% in our guest mortgage. As we were coming into this season, the marina had scheduled to implement a guest mortgage rate increase just to be out there, be competitive on the Puget Sound, but due to the coronavirus, we held off. Moving forward, as we move forward, we're going to need to market the marina, reach out to these past yacht clubs and other supporters as we continue to count on all events, both land and water, to help support the marina. Moving forward, our city is very fortunate as boating and marinas have not only stayed strong, but are anticipated to remain strong. Some upcoming things we're looking forward to is finishing a fuel system upgrade, which will improve our service to both our tenants and our outside customers. We're looking at moving ahead on restarting the tenant restroom project, which hopefully will supply new updated restrooms, laundry facilities, lounge areas, and additionally a rentable second story for increasing marina revenues. The activity tent will be finished and ready for the 21 boating season. And finally, I'd like to say we value the recommendation by the DMMA for introducing the city to Mark Brunzell and his consulting team from the Wagner Group, and look forward to our continued partnership as they help us navigate the waterside look at the marina development, slip configuration, and dock replacements, along with sharing their expertise in the needs of the boaters today and their visions as boaters of tomorrow. And that concludes my report.
Scott, that was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Public Works. Brandon.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Good. Just briefly, I just have 4 slides to go through, and I'll try to keep it brief. But essentially, what does Public Works do? So you can see there, I've kind of broken it down into 3 basic functions. We have maintenance and operations, all of the city's assets, roadways, storm system, our parks, city buildings, everything we own and are responsible to maintain. And then there's the capital program, which is the improvement and the construction of new assets or the improvement of existing assets. And then, of course, importantly, the development review. Public Works is involved in the review of any developer built or privately built asset that gets added to our system. Next slide, please. Thank you. And without belaboring, everybody's aware of COVID and some of the main things we did to respond immediately. We had, at the time, 6 frozen positions, 4 in maintenance and 2 in engineering. But just like during the snow or a windstorm or rain event, Public Works doesn't stop. And so we essentially kept working. The Public Works crew, we went to a rotating shift for the maintenance staff, 1 week on, 1 week off for a few months, just to work into some social distancing and help us, kind of get a strategy after May. Engineering staff primarily were able to remotely work, although we have some project management tasks that require occasional office visits or our right-of-way inspection staff. Utilize online meetings, virtual inspections. We'd work with contractors or utilities to take photos of work zones or work aspects when possible. And then of course we paused several projects to assure that we had cash flow. And so any project that was not started, we paused and took a hard look at that, especially any project that was involving general fund dollars or one-time sales tax dollars. We did move ahead with some projects. Next slide, please. Ongoing, we are currently, like I mentioned, down 4 maintenance staff, and we have 20 total. So we're at 80%, and we do want to look at getting 2 of those spots refilled this year prior to any fall or snow event that might come, as our maintenance crew acts as a team in response to that. But we're at 80% in our maintenance crew. We're going to continue to telework and do virtual meetings and inspections when possible with our engineering staff. I mentioned we did continue with several key capital improvement projects. I won't go through the list. You've heard about, about all of these. And just a testament, I do want to just publicly thank Scott Romano for his continued efforts. He was involved in several of these to see them across the finish line. And we look forward to allowing the public to get full use of all of these when the time comes. We also we started some new capital projects, primarily those 3 projects you see there, the Barnes Creek Trail section and the traffic signal at 208th and 24th, and started the design on 24th. These are all grant funded or significantly grant funded. So using other folks' monies, we definitely wanted to move these projects along so that we didn't lose those funds. And as I mentioned, we do want to look to fill some non-general funded positions that we know or we feel the funding sources is secure. Those would be the 2 maintenance positions I mentioned, 2 of the 4 that are in surface water. That comes from the enterprise fund, which is fairly stable, a technician position that's swim funded in engineering, and 1 engineer position that's in Fund 105 that Susan mentioned earlier is doing very well, and with our increased and active development trends, that's an important position. Next slide, please. So just to kind of highlight and summarize the Public Works challenges going forward, we did, and the council approved, and I thank you for the new janitorial contract. We've had positive responses. It does cost a bit more, but I think that's money well spent, especially in this era of cleanliness and just a heightened focus on safety with this virus. As I mentioned, there's been no apparent slowdown in commercial development activity, and that's exciting, and to be a part of and see that. On the downside, though, we still have a big hole to fill and deal with regarding our pavement program. We've lost $1 million with I-976, so that'll be one of our challenges in the remainder of 2020, is looking at options and avenues to fill that significant hole. Sound Transit is also picking up. You'll see a lot more construction. There's a lot more demolition going on. And in January, the SR 509 extension will begin their project in force with a notice to proceed expected in January 2021. We are seeing a decrease in gas funds, and I'll let Beth Ann maybe get into this a little more detail due to people traveling less, obviously, as well as our red light photo enforcement. That is down, I would say, about 35% from year to year if you look at June 19 to June 2020. And with no school, there's no school zone enforcement. And so there's no children present. That those funds, we have gotten a waiver from our vendor, but still we used the excess funds to help supplant some of our safety and sidewalk projects. And so that's going to be a challenge going forward as well. Those are the slides, and that completes my presentation.
Brandon, thank you. A couple of things I'd like to mention. I think that between you and Dan, especially working out kind of the staggered work hours early on was really helpful. And I think also that with a somewhat diminished staff, there's no sign of public works, maintenance, landscaping, any of that not happening. So really appreciate the management for that to be the case. So now we'd like to move on, and we'll try to go through these quickly, but we'll go to administrative departments. And these are support departments, primarily city manager's office, but the next slide will tell you everything.
Michael, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
Clock I'm looking at is saying somewhere around 8 minutes before we shut down, and I don't think you're going to be there. So I'd like to make the motion, and I cannot see council hands, so I would have to ask someone else to, oh, maybe I can. I'd like to make the motion that we extend the meeting to 8:15.
Second.
I think I caught an initial second by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. All those in favor, please raise your hand so I can be counted. I see Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Banks, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Martinelli, sorry. And there's Councilmember Harris. Okay, thank you. I was able to see everybody in the matrix. Okay, I just think this information is too important for us to get out in two pieces. So at this time, we're going to go forward. And Michael, the floor is back to yours, but we'll continue forward 8:15.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll try and do that. So administrative departments, as I was saying, the next slide pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the city government. Next slide. There you go. That says it all. So Bonnie would like to talk about city clerk's office briefly.
Can folks hear Bonnie? No, I'm not thinking you can be heard.
No.
You did.
Hang on. Hello.
That's why I had my headphones.
Bonnie, you want me to just walk through this?
No, at this point, we cannot hear you. Turn the volume up. Is there a volume switch? No, I'm talking about on your headphones.
Yes.
Yeah, we can kind of hear her on your microphone, if that might be helpful.
You're saying you can hear her on my microphone?
Well, when she answered you, we could hear her on your microphone.
Just 1 minute.
No.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Hang on a second, folks. I apologize. We're going to move a microphone and get it closer to her. And I think that will do the job. Or do you have one over there? If you turn it on, does it go, did it start to squeal? I actually, say something into it a little closer.
Can you hear me now?
I don't
Maybe
think,
Michael can just take it away.
I'm sorry.
Bonnie, you want to just come in my office and use this? You could do that.
Let's do that. It'll take 2 seconds. Mask up and if chaos ensues, well, we'll try and manage it from here.
Can you hear me now? This better be worth it, right?
We can
hear you. Okay, so as mentioned, the city clerk's office is the support staff of 3. We have the public records analyst, the deputy city clerk, and myself. And as I mentioned before, we have 1 out on leave, so it leaves us with 2 staffing. And this is my favorite slide. You might remember last year, there wasn't a vacant spoke on that ship wheel to put the city clerk's office in there, so I just stuck it in the middle for fun. And my logic at the time was that information would come in from the spokes into the middle and it would go out from the spokes, and sometimes it stopped in the middle of the spokes and we kept the documents, retained them, but sometimes we put them somewhere else. And this PowerPoint's a great example. All the departments were feeding us information through the spokes into the middle, and we created what you're seeing tonight. With COVID, we're still using the middle of the wheel analogy more and more. With a lot of our employees working from home, we're processing most of our contracts, documents, invoices, other papers electronically, using electronic signatures when we have them, and figuring out what to do when we don't. Trying to find something positive during COVID. This actually gave us a jump start in our records management, where we're keeping most things in electronic format and eliminating all the paper that we can. In addition to making sure we were in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, state law, and our own rules, we had to figure out how to facilitate our meetings with restrictions from the governor's office. And as I've mentioned many times, we have a fabulous IT department, and they have been instrumental in making these meetings happen. We get some glitches every now and again, but through those challenges, we continue to get better using Zoom and finding ways to keep our public engaged and being able to participate in our meetings, which is important. And through all of that, there have been a ton of communications that we've sent out to the community, providing not only information on our meeting processes, but what's happening in the city, and giving out resources that we hope are helpful to our citizens. It's a balancing act, because pushing out so much media, you don't want people to kind of overlook the important things that you're putting out there by ignoring you. It's kind of like E.F. Hutton, I don't want people to listen to me, but so that's kind of been really one of our struggles, is how to make sure that they're really getting what they need and not just overlooking something because it's the 6th post that I've done for the day. And we do this all in addition to a number of other duties that help other departments do what they can do. Of course, last but not least, I can't let a presentation go by without some public record statistics. January to July for this year, we've had 1,134 records received, public records received so far. Last year, we were at 1,072, so we're a little bit high. I think I reported last month we were a little bit low, so it turns pretty quick. And I anticipate we'll have about 1,700 public records requests for this year. And as I mentioned, we have 1 person handling all those requests, and with her being out on leave, Tara has taken on those duties in addition to what she's already doing, like Tim mentioned, civil service secretary and safety board and contracts as well, and insurance claims. But we're working on balancing her workload to ensure that she can still give quality service to our customers, which is our employees and the public. I can't thank both Tara and Sarah enough for all their hard work and for helping to make things run so smoothly. And that concludes my presentation. I'll run back out and change the slide. Hold on. Thank you.
Yeah, go back to administration.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Bonnie, thanks. Yeah, City Hall would not function without Bonnie. So I want to talk a little about legislative affairs, and we have Anthony Hempstead here is going to provide us a brief presentation on legislative affairs. But I want to make the point with the council that, you know, council establishes a legislative policy, or a group of policies, and then they are formally adopted by the council. And then I am directed to implement those legislative affairs. And the way I do that, one way I do that, which it makes my life easy, is to hire Anthony to help us with that. But everything we do relative to legislation is like a strategic approach. And that strategy involves many elements. Recently, the mayor and I had a relatively long, very informal conversation with Congressman Smith. We've also recently had discussions with Tina Orwell, where she was hoping we could provide support for a program which we are able to do. But I want to mention to council once again that the critical nature of the strategic approach to this is knowledge as to who's saying what to who or whom. And so when any of you, and a number of you are really great at this, but if you have discussions with electeds, federal, state, or county, or local, and it pertains to anything the city has an interest in, to let us know. Because the last thing we need is for mixed messages to be sent when we're trying to present a unified understanding of our position. That's absolutely essential. And I know I'm basically saying that for Anthony because it makes his life easier, believe me, if he knows what's going on with our interactions with our legislators. And we don't in any way say constrain those, but we want to know about them, and we want to make sure that any given elected is not representing that they're speaking for the city if that's not the case. And the people that's speaking for the city is related to the legislative policies that were established. So with that, Anthony, could you do a brief presentation?
Would be happy to, Michael. And yes, given the time, I will be very to the point. First off, just briefly, did want to say that as I do interact with a variety of different cities, I want to congratulate the city of Des Moines again for being so well run, both financially and administratively. It's a real joy to work with Des Moines. Things seem to work really well. I've seen other cities really struggle financially right now. With the good fiscal oversight that Des Moines has had the last few years, it's nice that you're not really in the crisis that many of your peers are. But you guys probably hear a lot of complaints, but sometimes it's worth a little pat on the back too. You're doing well relatively. Okay, with legislative outlook, in some ways, this is the biggest wild card that you guys are facing as you put your budget together, because as Michael and Susan and Brandon all mentioned as part of their discussions, other people's money or other government's money is a huge deal. And looking forward for the 2021 budget, there could be major amounts of money coming in from the federal government that comes via the state government that we may be able to get allocated to the city, or there might be nothing too. And so it is challenging in putting a budget together. You really have to plan for zero, but it may be a few million too. With that, this major wild card out there that we cannot definitively say what's going to happen. Very briefly, this year, first few months went very, very well. We had a straightforward legislative goals I think they were pretty much all achieved during the session. Secured other people's money, $350,000 for designing the Redondo Fishing Pier. We worked on several different freestanding pieces of legislation that were passed successfully. Some with a lot of help from different council members. So thank you, each of you who came down and testified and helped on legislation. I also been very active on a variety of non-legislative issues. We unfortunately have spent seemingly way too much time wrestling about the bulkhead with the federal government in trying to get those permits issued and allowed. And that's been supremely frustrating, as many of you know. But for good or evil, we are not unique in that the National Marine Fisheries Service is holding up 40 different permits in Puget Sound right now. But we're working with a variety of other groups too to try to put pressure to get this this logjam broken and enable us to build as quickly as possible there. I also work on airport issues, and federal monitoring, of course, is becoming a bigger and bigger deal, because that's where the money is going to be coming from in the future. Go ahead and let's go to the next slide. For this next year, of course, as everyone has said, COVID is creating huge uncertainty. The federal government has helped out. Des Moines has already gotten about $1 million in pass-through funds from CARES funding, and very likely there will be more. Very hard to say when and in what form, though. But as that evolves, we're monitoring it very, very closely. But we may want to try to aggressively go after some opportunities as those take shape. There is a potential future infrastructure package. The latest one has been floated at $1 trillion. And in any normal time, when you would say $1 trillion, that would be a mind-blowing number. Even the federal government doesn't pass $1 trillion new projects lists, but we are not in normal times. Also, with the next tranche of COVID-related support, which is being negotiated right now back in DC, and day by day, how that looks changes. It could be anywhere from 0 for state and local government up to $1 trillion. Okay, it is very extremely unlikely to be $1 trillion, but that was in the package that passed in the House a couple of months ago. But it is likely to be several, might be 150 billion, might be 500 billion, but the last tranche that passed at 150 billion, $1 million ended up with the city of Des Moines. So there may or may not be a few million in the relatively near future that could pass through to the city again. Yeah, going forward is fine, Bonnie. For the state legislature, again, it's a huge amount of uncertainty. It will be convening in January no matter what. It's a long session. They'll be putting together a biennial budget. One of the areas of uncertainty is that they're looking at an $8.8 billion shortfall. But that number is kind of a finger in the wind right now with economic indicators changing so much. It could be much bigger, it could be much smaller. Also, there's going to be an election between now and then, and things could look considerably different with the legislature as we go into January. But currently we expect Governor Inslee to likely to still be the governor. The makeup of the Senate and House, the members will change considerably. The actual political makeup probably won't change too much. Maybe a couple additional seats for the Democrats, likely in both houses. But as far as substantive budget prospects for next year, there will be a new transportation package that provides new transportation funding. And a few months ago, that would have looked like a great opportunity for us to try to get some projects funded. Currently, that new funding is all going to have to go into backfill because the transportation budget at the state level has lost so much money, both from COVID and then from 976, if 976, if that plays out in the courts and it has to be implemented. But there's this wild card again of what happens with the federal government, either now or early January, February, with the new Congress of passing an infrastructure package. There could be a lot of money that goes to the states via the state legislatures, and so we may either have a transportation budget with no play whatsoever, or it may have a few extra $100 million or more. So we need to be ready as opportunities come up, but we shall see. Time-wise, Mayor, I will try to be very fast in finishing up, but I think there's some other things too. Do you need to extend for a few more minutes?
Please let me interrupt you for 1 second. At this time, I'm looking at the number of slides left in the deck, and I'm going to suggest that we extend to 8:40. So a motion to extend the meeting to 8:40. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I got the second from Councilmember Buxton again. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. I think all 7. Is that correct? Your count? Okay, passes unanimously. We are on until 8:40. I think we need to get through this presentation. Anthony, please continue.
Okay. And yeah, just to wrap up, same situation with the capital budget. It could be extremely tight, or there could be a lot of money that the state is able to dole out in the capital budget. So that could be a great opportunity for the bulkhead, for instance, or for Redondo Beach, or Redondo Fishing Pier. So lots of things happening. And of course, then there are also opportunities for policy bills that would not be dependent on federal funding. So we need to be prepared for many different things, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So how's that for a very murky outlook from your consultant?
I have an important clarification question.
I would ask that we still hold questions to the end.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Anthony, that was as murky as the politics you deal with, man. Just kidding. Okay, let's go back to, thank you, by the way. Thank you for that very comprehensive look at this in a short time. Let's go back to the one before this. No, there's a, yeah. So just briefly, city manager's office, you know, managed administration, all departments coordinate presentations like this around the budget. I'm responsible for interagency relations. I won't go into all of those. Those are all the ones you could, you know, regionally assume. Like legislative strategy I addressed, airport issues, which are ongoing. I'm participating in START. Next there. Yeah, you know, I chair the management committee, emergency management updates on Wednesdays. to, to try and make sure we're all in communication with each other. Work closely with SCORE. They've obviously had their challenges relative to COVID. I'm on the admin board. Beth Ann sits in for me quite often. She's also on the operations committee. Actually, she's on the finance committee. Ken is on the operations committee. I work with citizen committees. I wanted to make a comment. Earlier on, it was said, I think Nicole mentioned, Human Services Commission for us, for the city. So we had legislation, we wanted to get to 1% of our operating budget, which is approximately $200,000. And slowly, since we started doing this, 5 years, we started at, I think, 80,000. Now we're at 150, going to 175, and hopefully we can get to 200 next year. That would be great. But just to see that increase, and that commission made up of citizen reps who make recommendations is going to be important relative to finding resources for people affected by the virus. And we'll be looking especially at that in terms of recommendations from them. Working with Marina Redevelopment, obviously. In economic development, we've allocated a staff position from community development. Eric Lane is here. And we gave him the title of responsibility of economic relief and resource coordinator. And he's also a land use planner too in community development. And Eric and I are working closely on a number of ideas around economic development that we will release in the next week or two. There's a number of elements, there's a number of resources, there's CARES money, there's King County money, there's our money. And so we will be letting council know what elements we'll be pursuing as part of economic development. The other thing I do is manage consultants, and we have one of the greatest consultant teams. If you look at Anthony and Robert Holmes, Mark Bunzel, just phenomenal people. So that's the city manager's office. And with that, I'm happy to hand this off to Beth Ann to talk about the financial aspects of COVID. Thank you.
First, I was going to cover IT and finance as support departments.
Sure.
The first is our IT staff is very small. We have Dale, Chris, Max, and Terry Ann, and they're very good at their jobs, but they like to stay behind the scenes and basically make sure that they're managing our IT infrastructure, providing IT services, and also developing and adapting our information systems and infrastructure during these periods of change. I consider it a critical and essential service, especially in this time of COVID. So want to give them kudos for the great job that they're doing. When City Hall offices were closed, they were able to set up 50 employees to work from home within 10 days, getting equipment, connections, instructions. They've provided technical assistance and support for all departments with their changes in technology. We're able to help connect the EOC to the city network in one day. And as we all know, online video conferencing, Zoom, and they help facilitate the city council meetings virtually. Have assisted municipal court with a virtual courtroom, and transitioning to cloud software for plan review, pet, and alarm licensing. The next slide I'd like to have Sean Hunstock cover finance, because he's been instrumental with our team in overseeing our operations and working. So I'll pass it off to Sean.
Thank you, Beth Ann, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me? Great, thanks. I won't go through these individual areas. You can see the broad areas that the finance department is responsible for. Pre-COVID work plan, one of the items that we had on the agenda for this year was the implementation of a new finance, HR, and payroll system that AJ mentioned, excuse me, earlier. We have gone through a diligent process to select a vendor, and that was approved by council on July 16th. We have the kickoff meeting for that project 2 weeks from now. We've also implemented File Local for business licenses and B&O tax filings. We're 5 weeks into that process now. It seems to be going very well. And for those of you with businesses, you'll see renewals for next year coming out of File Local in the November-December timeframe. The 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report is completed. Our projection was to have that done by June 30th. We were actually done earlier. We were told by the auditors we're the first city in South King County ready for the audit. And we're happy to share. City manager is pleased to let council know that we learned last week that we received a clean audit finding for the 2019 financial statements. And that's a testament to not just the finance department, but all city employees involved with finances. And we've submitted that report to the GFOA for their Certificate of Achievement program. That's a program that recognizes excellence in financial reporting and public transparency, and we're pretty confident that we'll get that award for the 2019 CAFR as well. We also have in process the cost allocation plan. We're working with a consultant on that. The auditors require all cities to have in place a systematic and rational method for allocating overhead costs. The city collectively, with all funds, allocates over $2 million annually. And we've had a process in place for quite a while, but not a documented plan. So through feedback with the auditors and in previous audits, they suggested that we have a plan in place. So we're going through that process now and hope to have that process complete in order to inform and be a part of the 2021 budgeting process. On the next slide. Impact of COVID-19. Most of our finance staff are working remotely. Beth Ann and I are here frequently, but we typically only have 1 or 2 other finance employees in the office at any given time. But with that, we've been able to maintain productivity within the office and through social distancing, enforcing workplace safety. We've had to adjust some payroll and vendor payment processes, as well as depositing and cash procedures. And I'll talk briefly about a couple of those. We've assisted departments with exploring and implementing new payment options. You've heard about some adjustments at police, court, and other areas already, and to the extent that cash is involved with that or other forms of payment, we've been working closely with the departments to implement those new procedures. We've also been working with departments to implement new programs. The EATS program was mentioned earlier, and there have been other either new programs or changes to existing programs that once city buildings closed down to the public, we've had to implement some changes to existing programs as well. So we've been working with departments to implement those changes. Related to payroll, we've had to implement new procedures for electronic timesheets and meaning primarily spreadsheets, but also supervisor approval of those timesheets. We went from a primarily written hard copy process to almost completely electronic process, and within about a 2-week time frame. So that process has gone very well, I would say. We've also implemented new procedures for electronic benefit administration, even within or in the midst of the COVID crisis. We still have employees coming and going, employees taking leave and getting married and other things. So all of that relates to changes that need to be made for employee benefits. So we've been able to accommodate that even in a virtual environment or remote environment. And we've also greatly expanded employee participation in direct deposit. Almost all of our employees now are utilizing direct deposit, which just makes it easier for us to pay them and not have to handle manual checks for payroll. And quickly, AJ mentioned earlier the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. That act, among other things, implemented new leave options available for employees. So we've worked very closely with HR and legal to draft new policies as well as implement those new policies and communicate those policies and procedures to employees. And all of that required changes to our payroll system as well as development of new procedures and incorporating employees into that process. And finally, we've implemented new procedures for tracking employee time as well as other expenses for eventual reimbursements through the CARES Act, FEMA Public Assistance, Department of Justice, and other grant funds that are available for COVID-related costs. And with that, I'll turn it back to Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And with that, I'll turn it back to Beth Ann.
Okay, so the next slide. So related to the city finances, challenges, we planned for an initial decrease in forecasted revenues in a range of 10 to 15%, as I said earlier. One of the things, as everybody said tonight, the uncertainty and the inability to predict the length of the pandemic, and then what are the full impacts of having business shut down and not being able to get up and running again. The things that we do know, though, are our retail sales tax revenue through July 2020, which are our May sales. We have an overall decrease of 17.25% compared to the previous year to date. The biggest decrease is in construction sales tax of 43.9% from previous year. The good news is we have seen an increase of 18% in retail trade over last year. Some of the things, filing deadline was extended from the Department of Revenue for retail sales and B&O tax receipts. So we're hoping, I believe the deadlines for both of those were June 30th and July 31st. So since it's 60 days from the time that those receipts or the money is paid to the state, the city will get their portion of it. We should see in August and September, late August and late September, what the impact is. The good news is property tax revenue, we expect little impact in the long term. We may see some reduced cash flow in the short term due to the extension on the property tax due dates and also people's ability to pay. So we may have some delinquent property taxes. It's just more of a timing as folks have been at home and unable to pay their mortgages. Next slide, please. And then, as you've heard throughout the presentation, the city has taken many actions to respond to the financial challenges from COVID. Because we are a service organization, a big deal of our expenditures are related to staff, and our Human Services Director presented earlier the collaboration with individual departments on our strategy relative to city staff. Council approved the retention of one-time sales tax in the general fund, which was earmarked for capital improvements to cover 2020 operating expenditures. And we also put a hold on capital projects while we're in the process of assessing the project feasibility. And a lot of it is priority of funding. If we can use, as Anthony said, other government's money or other people's money, and at 100% with no match is my favorite when it comes to grant funding. So the next slide. As we put the 2021 budget together, we continue to use a conservative and sustainable approach in our financial planning. And as the judge said earlier, we're trying to use the crisis as an opportunity to review essential government functions and discover what our new normal may look like. The next slide. So here, and I apologize for being condensed, but it's trying to get all of it on one slide. The good news is the city started 2020 with a structurally balanced budget, and the fund balance in the general fund was higher than we anticipated, above the standard we set of 16.67, which is a national standard. We had approximately 24% fund balance. So that has helped us manage the crisis. Normally at the budget retreat, I provide a visual that shows current budget, our estimate for revised budget, and then our proposed 2021 budget, and an additional 4 years to give you a 5-year financial focus. Tonight, I've only given you 2020 budget, the revised 2020, and the 2021 budget. And I'm calling them the adopted 2020 budget is a pre-COVID. The revised 2020 budget is the impact of COVID. And then our best estimate snapshot in time for tonight is a continuation of COVID. And normally we present you with a financial plan that shows on the third line the numbers in green to be fiscally sustainable. This is an event that luckily we had fund balance to help us weather the storm this year. And we've taken actions, but we've also retained that one-time sales tax and B&O tax revenues to help cover operating expenditures. And then we also have, as Anthony said, we've gotten close to $1 million in CARES Act funding. We've planned for some FEMA public assistance. There's a King County Economic Development grant and a Department of Justice grant for the police department. As you move down, we've also planned for emergency management expenses. And we've also, our initial estimates of what we need to cover staff time. We've planned for some of the $200,000 of the CARES Act money to be used for economic development, and also to match the King County Economic Development grant with city funding to make that $98,000. So for 2020, we're able to plan an estimated ending fund balance of 17.54%, which is above the national standard, the 16.67 that we've planned.
Beth Ann,
However,
if I could make a comment, sorry.
Sure.
If I could make a comment, you know, it's fund balance is the reason we're not a troubled city right now. And we should never look at fund balance as anything other than the contingency reserve that protects us. It's not surplus money and it's not available for expenditure if you follow appropriate, conservative, sustainable strategies. I just want to make that point over and over, because if it wasn't for that, and the fact that when we got out of bankruptcy, we absolutely paid attention to structural expenditures, structural revenues, and the appropriate fund balance to protect us, we would not be sitting here in this position. Thank you.
That's correct. And the fact that we've, for financial stability policies, that we've matched our operating revenues to operating expenditures has put us in a good position for this year. Now in 2020, we're not able to have our operating revenues cover our operating expenditures. And so therefore, to get through 2020, we're using fund balance, we're using one-time sales and B&O tax money, and also the grant funding that we're getting from the federal government. Now in 2021, at this time, in this moment, we don't have enough information to address and make sure that the ending fund balances meets our standard, and we're working on that. Part of it is that information's coming in for revenue estimates and also cost drivers that, you know, pretty much the last 10 years, there's been kind of a stable environment or a known. The pandemic has just provided a lot of uncertainties. So that's where in August and September, we'll be working through these numbers and working with departments on how to make that a sustainable number.
Thank you.
And that concludes what I have.
Right. So Mayor, we've got one more brief presentation from Dan on capital projects. That's going to bring us very close to the time frame.
I think I can make it.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Bonnie, can you please go back to the previous slide? I just want to make one quick point here. So the 2021 budget on the far right column, as you look down at the bottom, what Beth Ann was describing was about just under a $750,000, I don't want to say shortfall, but it's a hole that Michael and Beth Ann and the team and I will work to solve over the next couple of months. But one of the tactics that council could consider as part of the budget process is to keep the one-time sales tax money in the general fund in 2021 like we did in 2020. So on this spreadsheet, you'll see that $400,000 transfer out to Fund 309. One of the strategies to keep our fund balance healthy might be to keep that money in the general fund. And so I wanted to mention that before, as we go to the next slide here, because normally our capital improvement program, we would have that pretty well wrapped up by now in the budget process. As I mentioned before, we're a little bit behind because of the impacts of COVID. But part of the problem that we're trying to get our hands around is the funding, some of the funding concerns. And I've listed a few of them here. One-time sales tax, likely going to be a strategy on the table for council to balance the budget. These are funding sources that are our main capital funding sources for building projects. So we have one-time sales tax, real estate excise tax. Some cities use gas tax to do transportation improvement projects. Many years ago, we moved the gas tax revenue into our street fund to fund regular street maintenance. So that is not a source that's used right now for capital projects. We've talked about the Transportation Benefit District and the significant hole that we have to fill. It's about $1 million a year. That is something that council needs to consider as part of the budget process this year. And how are we going to pave roads? We also get.
I got to interrupt you. We're down to 2 minutes. I'm not sure where we're at. I think. From what I can.
I'm less than 5 minutes on mine.
I understand, but we are on slide 85 of 94, and that the way we're tracking. Bonnie, what's your estimate? What'd you say? Yeah, I know. Motion to extend to 8:50. Is there a second? Okay, motion was made, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Tracy, did you raise your hand? Councilmember Buxton, did you raise your hand?
No, I think we should extend to 9 o'clock. We have, we still have board and committee reports, and we'll have questions unless you're going to say that we're not allowed to ask any questions.
We're not going to get to that tonight. We can extend till 9 o'clock, but I fully expect, by the way we're tracking, that this is going to take us to 9 o'clock.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody wants.
So I'm in favor of 9 o'clock. I'm fine.
Councilmember Nutting, you had your hand up.
I absolutely not. I mean, I appreciate all the work staff's put into this, but we're time boxed and continuously going over with presentations and stuff. 10 more minutes and we're done.
I would, I'm sorry, I would just respectfully disagree. I think we should go to 9 and then get it over with instead of having to extend it again.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll modify my motion to go to 9 o'clock, but I will say that we will not have, in the attempt to be fair, I won't be able to open this up to questions primarily because I won't even be able to get through this council. at least to get everybody with one question. So I will go to the end of this presentation, and I believe that they can get it done in 20 minutes.
We can get it done in 5, Mayor.
You get it done in 5?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're going to have another 5 minutes of discussion so we can figure out how to handle questions and where we'll pick things up. But we just don't, I mean, there's no way that I can, in fairness, get through this council and even let everybody ask one question. There's just not enough time tonight. So at this point, I mean, we've had 8:50, we've had 9 o'clock. You say we can get through it in 5 minutes. Because of where we're at, I will change my motion to 8:55. Wait a second, is that what time it is? Yeah, it is 8:55. That gives us 15 minutes. Anyway, is that acceptable to you, Deputy Mayor Mahoney?
Sure.
Okay, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. I see 7. Okay, 8:55, and then we terminate.
Maybe a different word.
Well, the meeting will end.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on. So these are the main funding sources for building capital projects. So a lot of these funding sources are impacted moving certainly this year as well as next year. So as we present and propose projects for the capital improvement program, the projects we are going to be bringing forward are predominantly going to be grant funded projects where we'll use the limited amount of local tax money that we have to provide the match towards these grant projects. You know, sometimes we get grants that have no match. Those are the favorite, but those are not very common. So I'm going to run through a few lists of projects here. I have not included projects that we are currently working on in 2020. Those projects that we don't finish will roll forward into 2021. We will also include other projects for strategic purposes. We may not have the funding currently for those, but we're going to put them in the CIP, anticipating that we will go after grant money for those projects. So as Anthony mentioned in his presentation, if there is federal stimulus money or federal infrastructure grants available, we want to be ready with shovel-ready projects that we could apply for those grants. So next slide, please. So an abbreviated transportation CIP for next year. A handful of projects, the 24th Avenue South. This is a Transportation Improvement Board funded, grant funded project. Our South 224th Street project is funded by neighborhood impact fees in Pacific Ridge and also contributions from Sound Transit. This will go from Pacific Highway to the east to a street end that will abut the guideway for Sound Transit. The bulkhead project, one of these days we will get the permit. We are ready to go the minute that we get that permit into construction. So that project will continue. And Brandon mentioned these other significant state projects and the light rail project. Next slide, please. We have a number of park projects that are going to continue next year. The Van Gasken Park landscaping, we are required to protect that site. It will happen one way or another next year, whether we get the grant funding or not. We're going to have to do that project. Midway Park, Susan mentioned the grants we've got to expand that park, so we'll be working on that. And we're in design on the Redondo Fishing Pier, and that'll continue next year. Next slide, please. Building facility projects. Normally we have a handful, maybe 3, 4, or 5 building projects in our CIP. I don't anticipate any projects next year for our over 24 buildings that we have in the city. There are no grant monies available for these types of projects, or very few. So any projects that we have for our buildings come directly from local sources. And so all of these projects have been put on hold in 2020, and that'll likely continue next year. We've had some comments tonight about the parking equipment. That will be in the budget for dealing with that equipment one way or another. We obviously will come to committee to talk about the ramifications of how to replace that parking equipment, and ultimately back to the council. But some budgeted amount will be included for replacing the current equipment in the budget. Next slide, please. I've got two enterprise funds to go over. The SWIM, the Surface Water Management, is an enterprise fund. There's 4 projects that main projects for next year. A lot of just pipe replacement projects for our storm pipe. And then the top project there is a culvert replacement project that we're partnering with WashDOT. And we'll see an amendment on that project coming in September, where that project will probably be built in 2021, 2022. Very complex culvert project on that. So next slide. My final slide. The Marina is another enterprise fund. We've got some ongoing dock electrical upgrades that we're going to be working on next year. We got Scott Wilkins was able to get a grant to do some power upgrades in the guest moorage area. So that's a project we're going to continue. He mentioned the tenant restroom. And then each year we've been putting some money aside for that dock replacement that's scheduled in 2023. We have some more funding next year that we'll be putting aside to help pay for that first dock replacement in 2023. And the recommendation for that will come out of the work that Mark Bunzel is doing on his work. So Michael, that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate the patience of council. None of us have ever been through this before either. So we wanted to give you a bit large a picture, as clear a picture as we could. I want to make one comment regarding the CARES money. Des Moines is eligible, and I think it was $31 per capita for about $947,000. But it's not like the Fed send us a check for $947,000. The issue is that that's reimbursable money for expenses that we have incurred addressing the COVID. And the way we've done that, all of us now do have line items on our timesheets for time spent on the virus activities and other costs that are reimbursable. And one of those costs is potentially economic development. And so we're looking at the moment of foregoing $200,000 of the CARES money that could help balance the budget for next year, as you saw, because we have the confidence we can come up with the resources to make that balance occur. And we can take that 200,000 plus some other money and invest it in economic development, as we talked about, enhancing aggregate demand. So I just want to be clear, that's not free money from the feds in a form of a check. That's, well-earned money that has to be documented and it's reimbursable, and we go from there. And nothing with the feds is simple. So, and bless their hearts, however. So at any rate, I just wanted to be clear. Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to present this to you all.
Well, like I said, I think the staff did an outstanding job presenting the content. There's still a lot of work left to do. Excuse me. And because I can't possibly in the time allotted get through a structure that would be fair to allow every council member to get in with questions that they've noted through here, Michael, what are your thoughts about the best way to get some of these questions answered, and help people start to work through the thought process before we move into our next budget meeting?
I think, Mayor, what I might suggest is that through, perhaps the middle of August to the middle of September, we hold some small group meetings with council members, no more than 3 at a time, and answer questions with the understanding, as we would have pointed out tonight, this is not an opportunity to appeal for pet projects or specific line items or allocations in the budget. This is questions about what we presented today to enhance everyone's understanding. So when we go forward into October, y'all make decisions about approving the budget. We've answered your questions.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for those who have questions to have an opportunity to come in and sit down. And I mean, the time that proposals will be made will come when we start having the public hearings over the budget. And for those of you who haven't been through it, that's just how the process works. But I think in the meantime, we need to make sure that everybody's there. There were almost 100 slides here tonight, and there's a lot of information there. And I think everybody needs to be able to get the opportunity to make sure that if there were things that, you know, were gaps in what they understood in the presentation, that they have an opportunity to get those answers before we move into the next phase of the process. So, Councilmember Harris.
I would also welcome if you could allocate some time at the next regular meeting for everyone to ask questions en masse. I think there's a lot of value in all 7 of us being able to, you know, it doesn't have to be a ton of time, but yeah, all 7 of us should be able to ask some questions before it gets too far away from this presentation. Thank you.
So Bonnie, when's our next council meeting?
September 17th.
September 17th.
A long time. Okay.
So
what do you suggest? Would that still work on the 17th? Or do you want to do smaller group meetings before then?
Well, I think the smaller group meetings, if folks want to have that dialogue, I think they should let the city clerk know, and she can work with your schedule, Michael, and you can have the appropriate staff in the room. They're going to be Zoom meetings. And so, you know, we do record them, and those Zoom meetings will be available to other council members. I agree with the fact that there is a dynamic when all 7 of us are there to discuss things. But at this point, you know, if I understand correctly, we're talking about clarifying or filling in gaps from the presentation. And then we will go into these types of discussions anyway, because I think the public hearings over this will have at least 2 of them as noted, and that will probably consume the entire agenda for that night, with very little exception. So it will definitely be there. Anyway, so I would say at this point, if you're interested in having one of these group meetings, please notify the city clerk, and she'll work with Michael's schedule and the appropriate staff. If you have specific questions about certain areas of the budget, it would be wise to suggest those areas so Michael can coordinate with the correct staff and have them in the meeting. And unless he delegates to Bonnie, I don't know how that will work. But anyway, okay. So we are a minute away from the end of our meeting. So at this point, this does take us to the end of our meeting. We were not able to get to board and committee reports or the presiding officer's report. So I will just say our next meeting will be September 17th. And do I have a motion to adjourn? If I don't get one in 50 seconds, we will adjourn anyway.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Banks, seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion to adjourn passes 5-2 with Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Martinelli being the nay votes. That takes us to the end of our meeting. We are adjourned.